The Earl of Branton was a prominent figure in the arts in the Kingdom of Lancaster. He was lauded for his subtle and colorful style, and now he is known as the Hand of God. The girl says that's what people who don't know him call him now. However, she believes that some of his works were actually his wife's. Then she asks the gentleman what he thinks. His Majesty says he is interested in this, but does not understand why Countess Brereton allowed her husband to get all the glory. The lady explains that Elton is the most influential media company in the kingdom, owned by the Duke of Sussex, and she asks the gentleman to publish her husband's true story. She simply wants her life back. The protagonist recalls that in her youth, she lost her parents and was the sole heir. At that time, Ryan healed her pain. He said he always wanted to be with her, Lady Brereton. The girl says that she has linked her future with him. The lady says her second son is ready. However, she understands that he is currently having difficulties inheriting property and obtaining a title. The gentleman asks what the point of being a count is, as he believes that every man should find a way to become famous. Hearing this, the girl thought that she wanted to fulfill all his wishes, since he always said that he did not understand what he did, because God did not love him so much. The main character even had to write his name on paintings, in the hopes that all the glory would go to him. And she did this to make him happy. The lady asks if the count is rarely home. His wife explains that he always claims to be working in his workshop, but lately he's been coming home drunk. The main character says that one day when he returned home, he smelled of another woman's perfume. Ryan denied it and asked if she was trying to blame him for something, then claimed it was partly her fault. The red-haired girl asks if Inez thinks so. She says that, honestly, she's not very attractive to men, but she knows they don't like crazy women like her, and suggests remembering that. Hearing this, the main character, surprised, asks what she should do. Charlotte replies that if she were in her place, she would leave the count alone because she knows he loves freedom, and then asserts that maybe this will save their relationship. The main character thanks her friend and says that she really appreciates her advice. The countess, looking out the window, reflected on how 3 days had passed, and her husband still hadn't returned from the workshop. However, she was worried, wondering if something had happened to him, or if he had a lot of work to do. Inez remembered that today was their wedding anniversary, but she understands that he's probably very busy, and so she'll bring him some food because she imagines his face when he sees it and thinks he'll be surprised. The main character loved her husband with all her heart because he was her childhood friend, and that was enough for her. That's what she thought until then. Standing outside the door, the mistress overheard her husband talking about what he would do if his wife found out about them. She also wondered if he would stay with her. At this time, the Duchess entered the workshop and saw her husband with his mistress. After the incident, Ryan changed his attitude towards her and tried to convince her otherwise. He apologized because he believed it was just a mistake and nothing serious. The Count said that the man sometimes behaves like children, but he will sort everything out with Charlotte. Then he hugs his wife and says that she is his only Inez. At this time, the main character thought that she could not refuse him such a thing because she loved him very much. The woman wondered if it was strange that she was trying to understand, since Ryan had cheated on her because she wasn't good enough. She thought that if he tried harder, he could become famous. But she wondered if he would come back to her then. One day it happened. My husband came to Inez and told her she worked very hard and thought she was helping him a lot. Then he asked if she thought it was time for a divorce. Hearing this, the main character was surprised because she was never prepared for that conversation and didn't even imagine it. Ryan tells his wife she's no longer the Countess of Branton, then describes her apathy, paranoia, and hallucinations, calling her a psychopath. He claims it's time to end things because they'll come for her soon, and so he'll say goodbye to her at this point. At this time, Inez realized that she had to run because she could not let them put her away. The main character doesn't understand how it all came to this because she was suddenly hit by a carriage while she was running away. The girl reflected on how she had dedicated her life to her husband, giving him her title, her fame, and even her life. She had given him everything. However, now she wanted it all back. After some time, the maid says in surprise that the lady is all sweaty, and then asks if she had a nightmare. At this point, Inez began to wonder if she was actually in her room. She began to wonder if it had all been a bad dream. Mary says that the lady is probably tired, because today is a very important day, and it is their wedding anniversary. Hearing this, Inez, surprised, asks what day it is. The maid replies that it is May 28th, 1825. Hearing this, the mistress is surprised, and the maid asks if she is feeling unwell. At that moment, Inez wondered how she could forget the worst day of her life. After all, it had been 3 years since she'd found out her husband was cheating on her with her friend. The main character reflects on the fact that she has returned to the worst wedding anniversary of her life. Mary asks the lady if she's sure she doesn't want to take a break. However, Inez doesn't answer. When she enters the kitchen, she asks in surprise why so much food has been served. The maid explains that it's a celebratory dinner in honor of their anniversary. The lady apologizes and asks if she can leave her for a moment. Mary, surprised, asks if she's feeling unwell, but the lady assures her that everything is fine and tells her not to worry. At this point, the main character thought about how she remembered everything: the wine, the food, and the flowers she personally selected to decorate the table. And she did it all to make her husband happy. Inez turned everything upside down because she knew that the husband she loved with all her heart and her best friend were lovers. The girl understood that the man who was her whole world never loved her, and therefore considered herself stupid because her love for Ryan was pathetic and her friendship with Charlotte was meaningless. Inez reflected on how ashamed she was of how naive she had been in the past. A few days later, the main character reflected on how no one had seen Ryan that day and assumed he was on a date with Charlotte. She decided she shouldn't cry, just work. The Countess thought that the first thing she should do was return everything Ryan had taken from her. She understood that the best way to regain her fortune and title would be through divorce. According to the kingdom's laws, to dissolve a marriage between aristocrats, the king must be given valid reasons. However, the main character understands this is a problem. In the kingdom's society, men are in charge, as they can make their way into the outside world, while women are expected to take care of the home. The Kingdom of Lancaster is the most conservative in their region, and the girl understood that the problem wasn't the laws, but that social status prevented women from getting divorced. She suspected she could cause a stir and failed to convince the king to understand. Inessa thought about the potential scandal and couldn't understand why she hadn't thought of it before. After all, she understood that Ryan's artist reputation was a result of her paintings and exhibitions. The lady considered telling everyone he wasn't a real artist for exhibiting her paintings under his own name. After all, she knew her husband's talent was mediocre and believed they were never the work of a god. The girl thought that if she could tell the whole world about this, her life would change. At this time, the butler informs the lady that he has brought her a fresh newspaper. Inez thought that Elton was the most influential newspaper in the kingdom, and that Ryan had previously published her paintings there, thereby achieving the title of the best artist in the kingdom. The girl wondered if she could somehow publicly expose Ryan through Elton. At this point, her husband enters the room and says he can't leave the house, then asks if it's shameful. He then picks up a newspaper and asks if she's looking for gossip in such an influential newspaper. And Inez asks him if he finds it funny, and also wonders if that's all he'll say. She wonders if he'll ask if prices have gone up, and then asserts that they're both enjoying this time. Hearing this, the man asks in surprise what she means. The lady explains that since she was ill, he has never appeared even though his wife was bedridden. The husband screams and replies that it's all because the work turned out to be urgent, and then asks if she doesn't understand this herself. Inez says that she doesn't understand at all, and then asks what's the matter. Ryan says that he has something to talk to her about, and then asks if she knew that the New Year's ball this time will be held at the royal palace. The royal family hosts the New Year's ball every year, a banquet, to celebrate the new year. The main character thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to make a good impression on the royal family, knowing that everyone is eager to attend. The Earl says this celebration is very different from the previous one. After all, the Duke of Sussex himself will be there. He is King Edward's younger brother. Before ascending the throne, he was the king's right-hand man and is now the owner of Elton. The husband says that the Duke also supports talented artists, and everyone sponsored by this man has achieved unprecedented heights. Ryan insists this is her chance to become the best artist in the country, so he suggests she prepare and get into shape. At this point, the protagonist reflected on how, even in the past, her husband always saw her as a servant and a means to achieve his ambitions. However, she believes things are different now. She will be able to meet the Duke, and if she's lucky, she might persuade him to publish the article. The maid looked at the lady and thought that she had been very tired lately, and remembered that before she was busy either cooking or embroidering because she always wanted to do something nice for her husband. Mary thought she'd really like to help her mistress. But then another maid reports that Baron Jason's lady is currently on the first floor. The maid informs the mistress that Baron Jason's lady has come to visit. Upon hearing this, the lady, surprised, asks if she has an appointment with her. The maid explains that the lady has come herself. Inez realized that Charlotte had always acted in her own way, and still didn't give in. She also wondered how long she'd been looking down on her. Charlotte asks her friend what's taking her so long, and then tells her she heard she was sick. The red-haired lady asks if she's really sick, and why she looks so cheerful. Then she asks if it was a lie. Charlotte says there's a New Year's Eve ball coming soon, and asks if Inez is coming too. She replies, "Of course." A friend says that this is wonderful, because in fact, she does not have a carriage to go to the ball, and she asks if she can borrow her carriage since she thinks that they are friends. Hearing this, the maid was surprised, because she realized that she wanted to ride in the marital carriage. The knife reads that, even if they are in a close relationship, she cannot do this. At this time, Inez realizes that her friend is smiling so slyly, but she knows that she and Ryan were planning to send her to the hospital, and she remained in the dark until her return. The main character takes her hand back, and then wags her not to touch it so casually, and then asks if she knows what decency is. The lady says that even if they are friends, then turns around and leaves, saying that she is not feeling well today, and therefore suggests that he leave her. At this time, Inez thought that she was different, and not the naive fool she had been before. At the royal palace, King Edward says he is glad that the Duke of Sussex is also going to the ball. His Majesty asks why he's so serious, and suggests he relax. Then he asks if he's really so dissatisfied with being forced to go to the ball. Enoch asks the king what he was thinking, and the master asks if this isn't a wonderful chance to meet a young and lovely woman, and at that moment he thinks about how he wants him to marry. The boy explains that he'll be coming to the ball's opening and then leaving. The king tells him to dress nicely and asks if he understands, then informs him that his lady-love will be there. When the young gentleman left the king's chambers, he thought that the lady of his heart, and these words impressed him. Meanwhile, Ryan angrily asks what's taking so long. And when he sees his wife, he's surprised and asks if she's crazy and what kind of outfit she's wearing. Inez says she heard everyone would be dressed up at the ball, but her husband insists he was trying to be nice, and then asks if she was trying to embarrass him. The main character grabs him by the shirt and says that he came in a first-class suit, and then says that when a person comes to a banquet in second-hand clothes, she wonders if this would be even more shameful. At this time, the girl thought that she had earrings given to her by her mother, and if she had not returned, Charlotte would have worn them. Inessa reflects on the fact that she will rewrite her destiny. At the banquet, when Baroness Wickham saw Countess Brereton, she said with delight that they had not seen each other for a long time, and she looked great. The other ladies also noticed that the Countess was very beautifully dressed and found it odd since she always wore rags. The lady in the red dress said she had heard that the Count neglected his wife, but thought it was just a rumor. Charlotte asks her friend what her outfit is and asks if she thinks a solid color outfit looks better. At this point, the main character thought it was a lie because Charlotte always said that when she stood out in a crowd. Then she replied that she looked even more beautiful this way because she really liked the outfit, and the Baroness complimented her. At this time, the lady with red hair does not understand what happened because she knows that her friend always listened to her. The Countess says that when she dressed at her own discretion, no one complimented her, and therefore she believes that her style is better than Charlotte's. At this point, her husband asks what she's saying, and also inquires why she's speaking so rudely to Lady Jason. He asks if she's trying to humiliate him with her behavior, because she thinks they're best friends and decided to publicly quarrel with her. Count Ryan thought that this was a great chance since she had been acting too arrogant lately, and thought that public humiliation would do her good. At this point, the Duke arrives and says he feels he's come at an inopportune moment. He says the Earl of Brereton's paintings are quite fine, and he's come here to meet him personally. He then says that no matter how emotional he may be, he shouldn't raise his voice in a place like this. Ryan apologizes. The Duke of Sussex says the Earl has achieved success in the art world, then asks if this happened after his marriage to the Countess. He claims that after the marriage, his wife remained close and supportive, and thinks today is a wonderful day. Then he asks why there's unnecessary squabbles and suggests they enjoy the banquet. The gentleman asks him to forgive him and says that he hopes that they will have a good time. The main character doesn't understand how this is, because she thinks that this is the first time someone has appreciated her efforts, and she is so touched that she is ready to burst into tears. When the Duke went out onto the balcony, he thought that he could not help but show up at the ball since these people were waiting for him. Inez greeted the Duke of Sussex. He surprised asked her why she had come to see him. She replied that it might seem strange, and then asked if he knew why her husband didn't paint portraits of other people. The gentleman wondered what she meant by that. And then he thought that he'd never heard of any portraits painted personally by the Earl of Brereton, but he assumed that such renowned artists, as he must have received many commissions. Inez says it's because he can't draw. The paintings by Duke Ryan Brereton weren't actually painted by him. The Duke recalled how he'd loved the painting the first time he'd seen it. The gentlemen, however, were surprised to hear that it was a new painting by Ryan, and couldn't understand how a newcomer could paint such masterpieces. The aristocrat says, His Excellency, the Duke of Sussex, is simply captivated by the painting. He describes its beauty as mesmerizing, and reports that according to rumors, he deserves to be called an artist with the hand of God. The lady reports that up to now, all the paintings published in the name of the Earl of Brereton do not actually belong to him. The Duke, surprised, asks what she means. Inez replies that, frankly, her husband achieved his fame thanks to another artist, and then asserts that he's not a real artist. The gentleman says that if what his wife said is true, he wonders if it will offend Lancaster's art world. He then asks if she can prove her words. The girl claims she can do it, and then she takes paper and pencil, and the man thinks she's trying to draw a picture because her movements are as smooth as water in a stream. And he realizes she's been hiding her talent all this time. The lady announces that she is finished, and then shows her drawing and says that she was Ryan's artist. The Duke tells her to stop, as he believes she doesn't need to explain anything further. He says that the Count stole her name, and that's why no one has ever seen the Count at work. The Countess says that if he painted in front of others, everyone would know his secret. The man, surprised, asks why she decided to reveal his secret. The main character replies that it's difficult for her to talk about it now, but she can say one thing: his reputation won't suffer. She then offers to inform her of his decision. The gentleman tells the lady to pay attention to Elton's ad next week, because his answer will be there. And then he comes closer to her and tells her that her hands are stained with graphite and offers to take a napkin to wipe them before she goes inside. When the girl returned to the hall, her husband asked where she had been, as the banquet was in full swing. Inez apologized and said that today she wanted to return to the mansion early and rest so he could stay, and she would go alone. Ryan says that since that's what she wants, he can go home and relax, and then asks if she understands that this is a social life. When the girl was left alone, she thought about what she had done and talked to the Duke of Sussex, and she really wanted him to accept her proposal. A few days later, a reply arrived from His Excellency. It was quite unexpected and quite bold, as the newspaper had written that he hadn't forgotten their conversation 3 nights earlier and wanted to discuss her gift in more detail, and therefore would eagerly await their meeting. At this point, the gentleman thought that if the Countess was right, this would be tantamount to betraying the empire and the art world. He believed it was nearly impossible for women and commoners to make a name for themselves, and he understood that it was wrong to abuse their fame. The Duke wondered if he hadn't known about this. However, he considers her abilities simply unparalleled. The butler informs the gentleman that the Countess of Brereton has come to see him. He considers that if it's true, it will be a sensation, and then suggests that she come in. The main character greeted His Excellency. He inquired about her well-being. She replied that thanks to him she was doing well. He then offered to continue their conversation. The guy says he thinks it's a bit strange, because it's very hard for an artist to hide his work process. If his wife was the one painting, then it's understandable why he refused to paint in public. The gentleman says the Count's questionable behavior is no reason to trust her, and at that moment, He thought that if what she was saying was true, then immediate action would be necessary. After all, this would require the Countess's help. The Breatron family holds a high position in the empire, but their assistance won't be considered a political game. It'll all be complicated, for there's another reason. Inez says that he is a very kind person, and she knows that he cannot help her, and therefore she wants to offer a job from which no one will suffer. Hearing this, the Duke was surprised, and the girl said that he was Elton's owner and a journalist, and then said that she wanted to completely destroy her husband and become an independent woman. The gentleman says that of course it's quite an interesting story, and then asks if it wouldn't be better for her to talk about it with her husband. He says that if she wants to write an article about it, there must be a good reason. The guy asks what she is trying to achieve by exposing him. The protagonist explains that she's a nobody to him because her husband has another woman, and that woman is her friend, Charlotte Jason. She then claims that these two betrayed her, and as His Excellency knows, it's difficult to win a divorce in this country for infidelity. At this point, the girl thought about how her life had been wasted and how it had all been for him. After all, she had tried so hard to make sure everyone knew the name Breatron. Then she announced that she wanted to reclaim everything that was rightfully hers. The Duke thought that she was very determined and that her goal was the complete confiscation of all property and title that actually belonged to her. And he also understood that she wanted to change the opinion of society through Elton. Mr. asks if she is sure about this, and then says that Elton is a large newspaper that is read by most citizens, and after the publication, the scandal will affect not only the Count, but also her. The young gentleman says that the article is certainly tempting, but as for her wounds, she should think about it carefully. The girl understands that her husband doesn't need anything except power and wealth, and now the stranger cares about her more than her husband. Inez claims she's already made her decision. He says the article must be a sensation for everyone to see, and that the most important thing remains. Then they report that the painting was published under the Count's name, so she must prove it's hers. The gentleman informs her that he has several of her works and that she needs to redraw them. The lady says she understands. When the girl entered the room, she saw a table with paints on it and thought that it felt like an eternity had passed. But in reality, 3 years had passed, and she understood that a lot had changed, but the only thing that had not changed was her talent. After a while, the gentleman asks if she's finished. The girl is surprised and asks if he's been watching her the whole time. He apologizes for startling her. Inez explains that there is still a little time left, and the guy tells her not to worry about it, because he believes that only a fool would not believe his own eyes, and therefore wishes her a promising future. The Duke of Sussex claims that the Countess of Brereton is the hand of God. When the gentleman saw the girl off, he wished her a good trip, and that she be careful. The main character gives him a handkerchief, and he asks if it's the handkerchief he gave her. The girl says he really helped her out back then. His Excellency asks why the lady is smiling, as if it's their first meeting. She asks if he's uncomfortable, but the gentleman demurs and says she should simply be considerate on the way home. The maid met her mistress, and she asks what's wrong with Ryan. When Inez went up to the bedroom, she saw her drunk husband, and there was a red lipstick mark on his shirt. A man reads about how, as a result of an investigation several years ago, the Earl of Briarton's paintings became widely known. They were beautifully painted, but they weren't painted by the Earl. They also examined his relationship with Baroness Jason. The butler asks the gentleman if he is listening to him, since he believes that His Excellency is still interested in the identity of the mysterious artist. The Duke suggests just taking a look, because he believes that this is not just a hobby, but a talent. As a child, it was difficult for him to hide his true feelings, as the prince was so gifted that he could have taken the succession from King Edward. And the more powerful His Excellency became, the more envious he became. The man said that this boy was so young and already a genius, and then asked if Prince Edward's appointment as Crown Prince should be postponed. He then turned to the boy and said that when he ascended the throne, he should not forget Mr. Felix, as he considered them all one family. Enoch turns to his older brother, who asks why he cried so much, and also inquires who offended him, since his older brother will go and punish the offender. The boy thought that the noble's words were just empty words. The butler turns to His Excellency and says that it seems to him that unrest is inevitable, Enoch agrees, saying that even after his abdication, people were outraged for a long time. He believes it's the same there and therefore sees this as a great opportunity, as the topic is so provocative that it will attract the attention of even the people of the empire. He asserts that the more copies printed, the more buzz. The young gentleman believes that Countess Brereton is truly a genius, because by hiding in the Count's shadow, she ruined her talent, and therefore he feels sorry for her. The man asks what he plans to do. The gentleman suggests that it would be a good idea to first attract the attention of the kingdom's residents and organize an exhibition. However, the exhibition will include the Countess's works. The butler says chaos could break out. But the guy insists it's inevitable because he thinks rumors will spread, and the title of this exhibition will become the title of an article. Meanwhile, the nobles are discussing a new newspaper that reported that Elton's owner is holding an art exhibition. The Duke of Sussex wants to support talented artists, and it seems this will help them gain more exposure in the country. Ryan asks his wife if she's heard the Duke is holding an art exhibition. She's surprised and asks why the exhibition. Her husband insists it's his chance to shine even brighter. Then he asks if his success isn't a source of pride for his wife. The Count says that he needs her to paint a picture, and then asks if she will do it. Inez says this is the first time he's had lunch with her in so long. He asks, surprised, "Is that so?" and then explains that he has a busy social life and it's easy to lose track of time. Her husband says things are a bit hectic now, and that she'll have to get up early and come home late, and then asks if she understands. He then insists that from now on, he'll come home earlier and try to always have lunch with her. Hearing this, the main character thought that, for just a moment, she simply found it funny, and then she said she'd think about it. He thanked her and then said he didn't know what he'd do without her. At this time, the girl thought that she was sincerely glad that he fell into her trap. Inez informs the Duke that Ryan has asked her to paint a picture for the exhibition. The Duke says that, as expected, the Count's greed knows no bounds, even though he knows such people are easy to read. The lady says they can now proceed with their plan to paint a picture for the exhibition in the Count's name and send a similar one in his wife's name. 2 paintings in the same style will spark discussions, and then people will expose the Count's lies. Enoch says that, of course, painting 2 paintings at once is no easy task, and believes he'll have to work hard. And the lady says she should thank him for giving her a chance. The gentleman says all that remains now is to fill out the paperwork, then asks if she needs a place to work, so she can paint 2 pictures at once. He says he'll help her. Inez claims that everything is fine because she can handle it since she already has an idea. When they arrived, the gentleman said that it was amazing because he didn't know that she personally visited Huabang Street. The lady said it was very comfortable and that she could buy whatever she needed there. And then she thought, surprised, that His Excellency had followed her. The girl believes that his beauty cannot be hidden by any clothes and that attention cannot be avoided. Inez says Mr. Ryan avoids the company of ordinary people, but he attracts so much attention. She suggests they avoid running into her husband, then reveals that she recently opened a studio with her own art supplies. At this point, the saleswoman says she hasn't seen the lady in a long time. Hearing this, the gentleman asks if this woman is the owner of her tailor shop. She replies that it's easier to hide this way, and therefore asks him to play along. The woman asks how the lady is doing, and then suggests that they go quickly, because she will show her the new toothbrush that she recently received. The saleswoman asks if she needs space for a studio. Then she tells her she has an empty top floor and asks about that as she thinks it would be perfect. Inez says she'll think about it and let us know what she decides. The saleswoman suggests going up there right now and taking a look around. The main character thought that this was a good place because there was a large window and a great view of the street. The woman says that once she has had a look around, she should come down, and she will wait for her at the bottom. Enoch looked out the window and said it was a wonderful view and that it inspired him to create masterpieces. The girl said she wanted to submit this landscape to an exhibition. She thought this place was perfect for her and thanked him for coming with her today. The Duke says he wanted it himself. The lady claims he's wasted his time and is probably hungry. She asks if he'd like to try a sandwich. The main character thought she was stupid, because it was impossible for the Duke to eat something like that. He wouldn't eat that kind of food, and it was food for the poor. And she believed she had made a big mistake. However, the guy took the food and thanked her, and then said that it was too good to be an ordinary sandwich. Enoch offers the lady a wager. He explains that if she achieves her plans and returns everything that is rightfully hers, then she must treat him to dinner. Hearing this, the girl thought he wanted to have dinner with her, and then she agreed, insisting she'd treat him to the most delicious food there was. He said he'd be looking forward to it. The next day, the gentleman came into the store and asked where Miss Eanes was. The woman replied that she was in the studio, and then asked if she hadn't told him she would be painting all day. Miss Rena reports that the lady said she wanted to paint a picture for the Duke's exhibition and thought her pictures were wonderful, but didn't think about her health at all. The woman asks the gentleman what his relationship is with her. She claims he comes to see her almost every day, and then asks if he likes Miss Innes. He only smiles in response. And then he wonders if it really looks that way, and thinks he needs to be extremely careful, because if this comes out, there will be a lot of problems. When the girl saw him, she was startled, and then asked why he was entering so quietly, then suggested coming closer. He explained that he knocked twice. Inez apologizes and says that sometimes she can't hear anything around her when she's drawing. The gentleman says it means she's too focused on her work, and then announces that he bought some food and asks if she wants some. Enoch showed the girl the sandwiches and said he thought she really liked them, which is why he bought them. She thanked him and explained that it was the first time anyone had ever cared so much about her. The lady announces that she's almost finished the painting and asks if he'd like to see it. She thinks it would be nice for him to appreciate her work right away. The gentleman says he'd be happy to see it first. The girl says the painting will be exhibited under her name, then shows the second one. The guy says it looks like a series of landscapes. She explains that she painted it that way on purpose because they look similar, and then everyone will guess it's the same artist. The Duke says he can tell her plan worked. She says she's glad His Excellency liked it. The gentleman asks if he can take the finished painting, but the lady objects and says she must take it home first, as she thinks her husband might like it and change his mind. Hearing this, the Duke thought that she was still holding on to her husband and believed that at least she hoped to receive words of approval from him for her talent. When the main character arrived home, she asked Mary to move all the things into her room. A few minutes later, her husband's carriage arrived, and Inez, surprised, asked if he had just returned, and at that moment, she felt the terrible smell of alcohol coming from him. His wife tells him she's finished a painting for an exhibition, and then asks if he wants to see it. He says she knows and wonders why she's asking about such things, then says he trusts her completely. Ryan says that if she doesn't mind, he will have a drink at the mansion. On the opening day of the exhibition, which took place at the Royal Palace, many aristocrats arrived. They understood that no matter how many paintings were brought, only the worthy ones would be selected. The head of the Royal Society of Arts, the Marquis Usher, wonders why there is so much fuss there, since this is a pavilion where paintings by the country's best artists will be exhibited. The man invites him inside and looks around. The gentleman doesn't understand why there's so much commotion and then asks what's going on. The gentleman explains that a painting by the Earl of Brereton was on display and invites them to see it for themselves. Then he asks if he thinks the two paintings are similar. At this point, the main character was surprised by the number of people who had come to the exhibition. She couldn't figure out how to get to the center of the hall. Suddenly, the lady overheard rumors that she had painted a similar picture. The gentleman believed the works were by the same artist, and they couldn't understand what the Countess was thinking. At this time, the young lady thought that this is what she had been working towards for so long, and she thinks that it is quite difficult to receive so much attention because her life has changed in contrast to the past, and now she is happy with everything. The Duke of Sussex asks the Countess if she has arrived, and then kisses her hand and says that he is very glad to see her. Seeing this, the lords thought they were so close. Meanwhile, the main character says she thinks he's attracted enough attention and considers him brave. The gentleman invites her to go because this exhibition is for her. The Duke asks for a moment's attention as he wishes to introduce Countess Inez Brereton, and then informs them that she is the creator of this exhibition's decoration. After all, she is an artist and the hand of God. The aristocrats were surprised to hear this. The lady asked if Countess Brereton had painted the Earl's picture. Charlotte approaches Ryan and invites him to look at the newspaper and then tells him that it says something terrible. He asks in surprise what is going on. And when he reads about two paintings of similar style at the Duke of Sussex's art exhibition, I confirm that the Earl of Briarton is a fraud. Ryan, surprised, asks if Inez has submitted another painting under her name. Charlotte, surprised, asks what he's doing since it's tabloid, and almost the entire town has read the news. The Count doesn't understand what the hell is going on, and thinks it needs to be fixed. Then he runs off to the exhibition. The nobles were surprised when they saw him, because they did not understand how he had the courage to come to this place. Ryan screams and turns to his wife, asking how this happened. He asks if she understands what she's doing, because she believes everything he ever dreamed of has been ruined because of him. The main character claims that all he wanted was to take the glory for himself, and then announces that she no longer wants to paint for him. The man was surprised to hear this. Inez asks if he heard her, and then insists she will no longer create for him. She asks how long he plans to use her like a parasite. At this time, Count Briarton thought that this was a mistake, because his wife had changed a lot, and then screaming he asked what all this meant. When the man saw the Duke of Sussex, he greeted him. The man said he was glad to see him, because he was a familiar face again. He insisted that at his art exhibition, no one was allowed to harm others, and he had neglected that. The gentleman said this could cost him his reputation. Hearing this, Ryan realized the article had been published by Elton newspaper. Inez suggests that her husband return to the mansion, and then informs her that a letter of divorce will soon be sent. The newspaper reported on the Earl of Briarton's divorce proceedings and the Countess's decision to change her life. Everyone was also interested in who the artist really was. After reading this, His Majesty says that such funny things are happening to them, and then asks Enoch if he is really ready for something big. The Duke asks if that's why he invited him here. He replies that he's simply surprised his brother is interested in a woman, as he didn't know he was interested in the opposite sex. The king says that the Countess of Briarton hasn't been seen in society much since her marriage, and he thought her life was a fairy tale. Then he asks if it's really that serious. His Majesty says he's curious whether this exhibition is worth visiting. Enoch asks him to stop as it's difficult enough without him. He also suggests not to burden anyone and simply sit and observe, as he believes that even if he visits the exhibition, he's unlikely to encounter her. The Duke informs her that she is currently engaged in divorce proceedings with the Count. He then asks His Majesty the Emperor what his verdict will be. The king says that, to be honest, he doesn't know, because after careful examination, he made a final decision that will not be biased towards either side. Edward says he doesn't know why, but if his brother wants to support the Countess, he should be prepared for the verdict. He asks if he liked her. At this time, at the Hamilton Hotel, a gentleman asks if Countess Briarton lives there because he really wanted to meet her. The main character looked out the window and thought it was good that this problem had been solved, but now everyday life had become a burden. After all, one day of the art exhibition and all the headlines about this news, the girl understands that Ryan is playing the victim, but according to the news from Elton's newspaper, his excuses are worthless. She would really like to kick him out of the mansion, but now she realizes there's no need to think about it until they're divorced. Inez understands that she has come this far, thanks to the help of His Excellency. At this point, the butler enters the room and apologizes, as she had stipulated that no one be allowed in. He then informs her that the Viscount's wife, or rather Ryan's mother-in-law, is looking for her downstairs. The main character recalls that when she first saw this woman, she told her that she was very happy to be part of her family, but she understands that she cannot heal the pain of losing her parents, but she will try to become her second mother. Inez understood that Miss Go's appearance was merely a pretense, and she knew that after the wedding, her father and Ryan had been siphoning off Brian's money, and this two-faced woman had humiliated her so much that she had become her mistress. The mother-in-law opens the door and says that she came to visit, but they won't let her in, and then asks what kind of rude behavior this is, since she heard about everything and thinks that her daughter-in-law disgraced Ryan at the art exhibition. The woman asks if this girl understands what she's done. Then, screaming, she insists that if she's his wife, she should obey her husband, and asks how dare she treat her son like that. The main character tells the woman that she is thinking of divorcing Ryan. Hearing this, Miss Go says she's a slut, who after all these years hasn't been able to bear him an heir, yet she's so brazenly talking about divorce. And then she announces that she's putting Briarton's honor on the line. Inez tells her mother she doesn't know why she suddenly started talking about Briarton's honor. Then she explains that after her divorce from Ryan, those people won't touch her, and besides, she's so happy. The woman screams that this is crazy. The girl says that regarding children, that remains to be seen since Ryan has a partner with whom he spent an inordinate number of nights. Therefore, she thinks he might have children, and asks what she thinks. Hearing this, the mother-in-law changed her tone and then calls the girl her children, and says that she is still young and does not know much about the world, and she understands how much Ryan's betrayal hurt her, and then says that men always do this even if they only have fun outside the home for a short time. At this time, the main character thought about how she lost her parents early and was never attached to adults, but that her mother always took Ryan's side in matters of marriage, and that she set her sights on the inheritance of the writer Beck. She remained silent and put up with all this thinking that there would be some meaning in it. Inez says that's all. The Countess claims that's absurd, and then asks if she thinks it's so easy to get a divorce as a woman. The mother-in-law says that nothing will work out for her, and she will beg for forgiveness. At this moment, the Duke enters the room, and when he sees the Countess, asks what happened. He says he simply decided to check if everything is all right. The lady explains that it was just her mother-in-law who dropped by to visit, and it was a bit noisy. The man says he told the manager not to let strangers in, and to make sure it happens again. But the girl objects, saying it's not worth it, as his mother is already bothering him too much. Enoch asks the Countess about living in his mansion. She is surprised to hear this. After some time, the main character says that this is a very fantastic forest, right behind the house. Due to her mother-in-law's intrusion, she couldn't stay at the hotel. The Duke, however, said he had several mansions, and so she could stay in one of them until the court hearing. The main character stayed at His Excellency's villa. With only one day left until the divorce hearing, the young gentleman asks her how she's feeling. She replies that she doesn't even know, because she's a little scared. Enoch asks why. Inez asks what will happen if she loses the case, because she thinks she'll have to live with Ryan as her husband, and if that happens, she probably won't be able to bear it. The Duke says that this will definitely not happen, and asserts that she will definitely win the case, and that he, as the owner of Elton, can assure her of this. At this time, the main character smiled and explained that she had never heard His Excellency raise his voice. Enoch asked for forgiveness and explained that he simply relaxed a little around her. Suddenly, Inez saw the rabbits and invited the gentleman to look at them. She said she wanted to make a sketch and asked if he could wait for her for a moment. He said she could draw as much as she wanted. Watching the girl, the young gentleman remembered the girl's words about how she had heard him raise his voice for the first time, and this made him laugh a little. The next day, there was a divorce hearing. The king announces that the divorce hearing for the Earl and Countess of Briarton is about to begin. He then invites everyone to take their seats in the hall. His Majesty proposes to hear the side of the Count, who objects to the dissolution of the marriage. Aristocrats say that the Earl of Briarton tried hard to avoid losing the case because he hired divorce specialist Viscount Turner, and his services are very expensive. The Viscount says he finds the very nature of the case somewhat odd, given that her husband appropriated her paintings and gained fame, and then asks if that's why she's filing for divorce. He believes the Countess's argument is unsupported by any facts. His Majesty says that he also heard that two rather similar paintings are on display at the exhibition. Turner says that the Earl and Countess had been painting together for quite a long time, and during this process, their painting style could have become similar, embarrassing the art world in the kingdom with false accusations and trying to dissolve the marriage as a woman. The Viscount believes that the reputation of the court and the Count is all in order to drag them through the mud. At this time, the Duke thought that the audience's reception was not as warm as it seemed, but he understood that it was not entirely clear whether the theft had occurred or not. The king proposes to hear the Countess's side. McDowell said he was the Countess's lawyer. The women were surprised to hear this, as they knew he was still quite young, and it seemed the head of the family hadn't yet managed to find a suitable lawyer for the Countess. At this time, the main character thought that, although he was very young, she was also surprised at first. 2 years ago, Viscount McDowell had not yet shown as a lawyer, but in the future, he began to be called the first lawyer of the Kingdom of Lancaster. Inez realizes that if Ryan's plan is just to hire a very expensive lawyer, then she already has information about the future. The man announces that the lawyer's presentation is beginning, and then says that the opposing lawyer claims that the Count and Countess worked together for a long time, as a result of which their drawing styles could have become similar, and then asks if this is his statement. The Count's lawyer says that's exactly it. McDowell asks everyone present to look at it and points to the couple's paintings from the exhibition. Then he asks the Count if he can describe the process of creating the painting, Street of Workshops. Ryan says this work captures the vibrant vibrancy of the street's workshops. He sought to create transparency by controlling the paint concentration so it doesn't build up in thick layers. At this time, the main character thought that her husband does not understand drawing at all and believes that he is saying this on the advice of his lawyer. McDowell asks if he worked on the paper dry on dry to avoid streaks. Ryan says that's absolutely true. Hearing this, the lawyer asks if that's odd, and then explains that the painting was done wet on wet. The lawyer asks if he sees a technique being used that allows for a soft blurring of the edges of objects. He wonders if the Count is unfamiliar with the process of painting a street in a workshop. Ryan, crying out, asks what he's talking about, believing it was just a slip of the tongue. The Duchess's lawyer asks if he can then tell them the real story behind the painting. Hearing this, the Count could not say a word, but Inez said that this street of workshops is the second street, and this is the view from the second floor of Madame Lant's studio. The woman's lawyer says that, as everyone can see, the Count has no information about this work. He claims to have painted the painting, but doesn't understand why he's so confused. Viscount Turner addresses His Majesty and says that his client is very worried about the divorce department, and therefore asks for understanding, as his testimony may be somewhat inconsistent. Turner claims they vowed to love each other, sealed their vows with marriage, and then lived what the Count believed was an ideal life. And so he believes he's deeply distraught over his wife's divorce. McDowell says he wants to get away from those stories about emotions and make everyone in the audience sympathize, because he knows that this is his trick. Turner turns to the Countess and says he understands her, as after the wedding the Count couldn't remain as faithful as before. Then he asks if all men don't have an inevitable social life. The Viscount says that women quickly become lonely, and at the same time the Count was often absent and was probably disappointed, and then asks the lady how she can resort to perjury. Hearing this, the main character does not understand how he can talk about such things, because she has experienced all her regrets and anger. Turner reports that, in fact, the Countess herself did not want so much fuss. He appeals to His Majesty and asks that the case be dropped from consideration and that the spouses leave together. Inez couldn't stand it and asked if this was the social life he was shouting about, and then asked if it was about loving one woman and being with another. Rayon, surprised, asks what she's talking about. Inez shows him today's newspaper and tells him that it accuses her husband of immoral behavior with clear evidence. At this time, all the aristocrats who were in the hall were given newspapers, and they read that this woman was Charlotte Jason, and thought that it was not surprising that they became such friends. The lady says that the whole point is that the lawyer's speech showed that the artist with the hand of God is the Countess. Inez says that the ideal family life they initially talked about did not exist because she knows that her husband only needed the title and reputation of an artist. Hearing this, Ryan screams and objects, saying that this is the delirium of a crazy woman. His Majesty says that he has listened carefully to both sides and thinks that if the non-obvious facts are set aside, a decision can be made regarding their case, and then he proposes to do so. The king says that the Count and Countess will now repaint the street of workshops. Hearing this, the Count objects. And the king says, "What won't you do for a fair court decision?" A few minutes later, His Majesty announced that he wanted to begin the authentication process. Then the couple began painting their own pictures. The king says that before the inspection, he wants to ask the Countess a question and is interested in whether she really wants to divorce the Count, and also whether her goal is to restore her good name and right to property if he guarantees this to her in the name of the king. The gentleman asks if she will agree to continue living a married life with the Count. The lady replies that not at all, and when he proposed to her, she thought that this marriage would make up for everything that was missing in her life and give her the family she never had. Inez says she believed the Count would help her forget her worries, as she would no longer be the sole head of the family. But now she understands that marriage isn't the only way to complete her life. The girl says it's the feeling of being noticed and meeting countless people. She then says she doesn't regret starting the divorce process at all, as she doesn't want to go back to the past. Inez says that for her, this is the moment of finding a second life. His Majesty says that he understood her, and then announces that, based on an investigative experiment to determine the true author of the Street of Workshops, and having heard the statements of both parties, he issues a verdict that from this moment the marriage of the spouses, Count and Countess, is declared dissolved. The king declares that the Briarton family title, which belonged to her ex-husband Ryan Gott, is returned to Inez Briarton and is not subject to appeal, and the matter is declared closed. Hearing this, the lady was surprised since the divorce petition was granted, and now Inez must be called the head of the Briarton family. They became interested in who the former earl would be now. Ryan wanted to speak with Inez, but the Count stood in his way and asked if he wanted to speak with Countess Briarton. He explained to His Majesty that he would like to speak with Inez for a moment. The gentleman claims that the Countess is certainly tired after the court hearing and thinks that it would be a good idea if he talks to her at the next opportunity. Enoch takes the girl by the hands and invites her to follow. He shows her a path where reporters won't be able to enter. She thanks him, and he explains that this passage is for the royal family only. At this point, the king tells her to thank the Duke of Sussex as he had strongly requested permission to use this passage. He then says that the courage she showed today is quite remarkable. King Edward believes this trial will set a good precedent, and he hopes it will inspire other nobles suffering in similar situations. His Majesty says that he leaves there in a great mood and then tells the Countess that they will see her again. Enoch asks the Countess if she is all right, and then says that His Majesty has always been something of a prankster. At this point, the main character reflected on how she had just reclaimed her title as head of the family, and that nightmarish past would never return. Then she turned to His Excellency and thanked him. The gentleman asks her in surprise why she's crying. She replies that it's because she's so grateful, but he insists she did it all herself and asks if it's worth shedding tears on such a joyful day. When the Duke touched the girl, he said her forehead was burning. Inez said she felt a little dizzy and suddenly fell to the floor. Enoch asks her in surprise what's wrong. When the girl woke up, she thought she was so embarrassed, but her heart felt calmer than ever. Meanwhile, Charlotte says Inessa is a crazy woman who thought she could tolerate it calmly. Then she claims she'll take every last bit of her. When the main character woke up, she realized that this was her room in the estate, and she became curious about what happened in court and thought that it was all a dream. The maid asks the lady if she's awake. Inez, crying out, says she doesn't remember returning to the estate, and then asks how the trial went. Mary replies that she won in court and is now the rightful head of the Briarton family. And then she says that from now on, she will call her not Countess, but Madam. The maid says that His Excellency the Duke of Sussex has driven her to the estate, and they must host a reception in honor of her reclaiming her title, and so she understands that there will be a lot of work involved. Mary tells the lady that she received a gift from the Duke, and it was a basket full of flowers. The main character reflected on how, when they first met, she was painting a still life with the same flowers. She also thinks he's truly attentive and has beautiful handwriting. The Elton newspaper wrote that the divorce case between the Earl and Countess of Briarton ended in victory for the wife, and that in fact the hand of God turned out to be Inez Briarton. When the girl read the newspaper, she realized that this article described in detail everything that happened yesterday in court, and she believed that His Excellency had made a lot of effort. The Countess thought that she too should clean up some things. Ryan screams and asks what they are doing and who allowed them to show up in his studio. At that moment, Inez walks in and says that of course she allowed it. Seeing her, the gentleman kneels and asks her to reconsider. Then he says he was an idiot and simply foolish. The man can't understand how anyone could turn away from such a good wife like her, and so he believes he deserves to die. And then he asks for just one more chance. The main character asks if he knows that this studio was made just for him, from the smallest pieces of furniture and wallpaper to every tube of paint. The lady claims that she personally chose every little thing especially for him, and he, in this very studio, laughed sweetly, kissed her friend Charlotte, and engaged in obscenity. Inez says she believed him and Charlotte, but he simply laughed at her. Then she congratulates him on his divorce and wishes him a good life, even though she doesn't know how happy his future will be. Ryan asks the girl to wait, but the knights intercede for her. At that moment, the protagonist thought about how the people who had always tried to be on her side in her past life hadn't given it a second thought. The mistress orders Master Ryan Gott to be expelled from the estate. Then she turns to the maid and thanks her. The Duke of Sussex turns to the lady and says that she handled the situation perfectly well herself, and he didn't even have time to get a word in edgewise. Seeing him, the main character, surprised, asks how he ended up there. The gentleman explains that he was passing by her estate and that the servants told him where to find her. Then he asks if this is her ex-husband's tailor shop. Inez says that she put her heart and soul into making this place for him, and that's why she just wants to get rid of it, because she thinks that it could be a much better place, and it could be an exhibition hall or something like that. At this point, the gentleman thought he, too, was acting like a fool, not understanding why he felt sad every time the Countess spoke of her husband, and why his brother had entrusted her with this particular task. Enoch asks the Countess if she remembers her promise to treat him to dinner when everything is over. Hearing this, the main character thought that now that the trial was over, she would no longer be able to see His Excellency. Then she announced that she wouldn't just treat him to dinner, but would repay him for his help with whatever she could. And so it could be anything, and he just had to tell her. The Duke says he wants her to paint his portrait herself. At that moment, he thought about how he'd like to stand out a little more with her. Within a few days, Inez began painting the gentleman's portrait. He said he thought a simpler composition would be nice too. The lady says that the thought that this portrait will be painted in gratitude for the service gives her strength. The main character understands that the divorce case is completed, and His Excellency met with her to paint a portrait. The lady announced that she would begin with a sketch. The gentleman, meanwhile, reflected on his lack of affection for the Countess of Briarton. Enoch recalls a conversation with his brother, who said it was the first time he'd seen him use his name and status to help someone. After all, his brother, who never once said what he liked or what he wanted, then asked if it wasn't interesting. Hearing this, the gentleman thought his brother had indeed understood everything correctly. After all, he had initially been interested in the Countess because of her genius, but now everything was different, and he was interested in a woman named Inez. The lady reports that the sketch is ready and he did a great job. The man objects, saying that the Countess did the writing and must have been more tired than he was. The girl asks him if he likes the sketch. He replies that it looks wonderful, and that she wrote it so beautifully that he's even embarrassed. Inez says she thinks she'll need a little more time to work on the color, so she thinks they'll need to meet again. Then she asks if that would be too much trouble. The gentleman assures him it won't be too much trouble, but then asks if it won't be too much of a burden for her, since she's only keeping this studio for working on his portrait, and wonders if she wouldn't be more comfortable remodeling the space. Hearing this, the main character understands that although this was Ryan's studio before now, it is the place where she paints a portrait of His Excellency. The lady says that it must be like getting rid of bad memories by painting over them with good ones, and doesn't understand why she's so embarrassed. Enoch asks if he's a good memory for her. Then he says that's very comforting. Inez looked at him, wondering if he was interested in her, but she knew she couldn't know what was in His Excellency's heart. And if so, she didn't understand what was going on with her. The main character believes she writes much more attentively than before, and feels at peace when she's with His Excellency. Lost in her thoughts, she suddenly overturns the bucket of water. The gentleman says he'll call her to be a servant, but the girl thinks that if she's not indifferent to him, she thinks it's not worth it, because she respects His Excellency, and that's the only way it should be. Ryan's lies and infidelity with Charlotte were reported in Elton's newspaper, in His Excellency's newspaper. It was also written that she was in fact the hand of God and Inez Briarton. The main character understands that His Excellency supported her publicly and understood that rumors would soon begin to circulate that they were close. Enoch turns to the Countess and says that her complexion is unhealthy, then asks if she's all right. She explains that she's just a little tired. Inez understands that His Excellency is truly a good man, and she can't tarnish his reputation for feelings she's not yet sure of. But she believes it's best to immediately rule out any possibility of a relationship, Leda says that she is very tired and then asks if they can finish for today. The Duke says that now she's a countess, and both as an artist and as the head of the family, she's so brilliant. He considers it such an honor to see her wings spread. And then he says he really wanted to tell her this and see her face. At this time in the royal castle, His Majesty is reading a newspaper and says that Elton's sales are breaking all records. Queen Helena asks His Majesty what he is studying so carefully, and she is interested in whether anything interesting has been printed in Elton. The king offers to take a look at it, and then says that, as expected, truth is far more interesting than fiction. She says it's the article about the Baron's daughter Jason. The gentleman asks if she's referring to Ryan Gott's mistress, since he didn't know they knew each other. She insists he certainly didn't, as she doesn't think it's the most pleasant of memories. She recalls that when they were in the garden, Charlotte said that he was so charming, and it was all thanks to the caring hand of Count Rambel. A man tells his wife that Charlotte the Leech is the one who pesters the Countess of Briarton and follows her everywhere at every aristocratic reception. He also believes she's bending over backwards to impress the nobles. The aristocrat says that this Countess of Briarton takes her along because they are friends. Inez greeted the queen and said she was happy to see her. Helen said they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and the red-haired lady said she was Charlotte Jason and was happy to welcome her queen. Her Majesty says she's very active and pleased to meet her. Charlotte says she's delighted to have the opportunity to speak with the queen and would have loved to join the tea party at the palace, but she didn't have the chance. Helen smiled and insisted that in that case there would be room for her next time. The red-haired lady said she would be honored, as in such wonderful weather, it would be simply wonderful to go boating together on the Hudson River near this island. The public was not aware of this, because no one knew that the Queen's cousin had drowned in the Hudson River while boating. Her Majesty thought that it was still unpleasant for her to hear a reminder of this, and then said that if she often appears in society, she will hear all sorts of things. Helen says it's wonderful that Countess Briarton did this, because she seemed very quiet at various meetings and receptions. The king says Enoch also helped her, and believes they still have much to learn. The lady says everything turned out well in the end, and plans to invite the Duke to dinner. The Queen says she has news, and thinks the Duke of Sussex will be interested to hear about it. Her husband agrees, saying he thinks it would be wonderful. The Countess of Briarton arrived for tea at Baroness Wickham's country estate. She was mindful of the fact that this would be her first social event since her title was restored, and that she must demonstrate her fortitude even after such a scandal. The main character overheard a conversation about how it was the Duke who discovered and helped develop Baroness Briarton's talent. Another lady commented that he must be remarkably perceptive since he owns the Elton newspaper. Then she added, "Who would have thought it would become the largest publication in the kingdom?" The young lady thought that if you look at it this way, there was even a scandal in the royal family regarding the succession to the throne, and His Majesty, whom she met in person, showed only the makings of a businessman, and she couldn't even imagine this. It was as if he was deliberately trying to abdicate the throne. The butler reports that among the invited guests today at this time, Inez thought it was time for her to come in. The Countess says she hopes the Baroness had a good chew, and then says it's a little awkward to appear there after such a long absence. The Baroness objects, and says that they are very happy to finally see her, and thinks that she must have experienced many difficulties during this time. The butler approaches the lady and says that he asks for forgiveness, and then reports that one young lady created a scandal outside in order to be let into the estate. The Baroness tells them to just throw her out of here, and then asks who dared. He explains that it was Charlotte Baron Jason's daughter. At this time, the lady with red hair asks how she dares to ignore her because she thinks that she will never leave Inez alone. A fresh rose in the banquet halls, the dazzlingly beautiful Charlotte Jason is exactly how she was seen in society. Charlotte believes she earned this position through hard work and didn't think anyone could take it away. When the Baroness read that the recent invitation to the reception was invalid, after all, what was written in Elton's newspaper was true. Charlotte realized that banquet invitations were being cancelled one after another, and Ryan had disappeared. She felt that this scandal was ruining her life, but she had put so much effort into getting into high society, and Inez was the wrong girl, and it was all her fault. The lady with red hair thought that she needed to meet Inez. The guard says the owner told him not to let her in. Charlotte, surprised, asks Mary what's wrong, and then explains that she's her owner's best friend and insists she told him to always let her in. The maid explains that the mistress has changed her instructions, and then says that if she is looking for a meeting with her, then she should arrange an appointment by letter. The Baroness asks why she should be given such honors if she just wants to see Inez. Mary, crying out, explains that she must do this because it's the basics of respectful behavior. After all, she knows how many times her mistress has fussed over her as a friend, and she can even express gratitude to her. Charlotte asks what Inez did for her, and then asks how dare a servant teach her manners. Mary says she thinks there's no point in continuing the conversation and suggests her mistress leave. She then informs her that her mistress has already departed for Miss Wickham's estate, where she had been invited earlier. Charlotte was surprised to hear this, as it was the same Mrs. Wickham who had rescinded her invitation as soon as the scandal broke. However, she considers it unimportant since Wickham and Inez are now together. The lady thought that she knew Inez well and would tell her that Ryan seduced her first, climbed under her skirt, and all that, and this fool would immediately calm down. Charlotte thought that if Inez accepted her again this time, she would spread such disgusting rumors that she would not be able to save her reputation. The Baroness claims she did send Charlotte a letter clearly rescinding her invitation. The butler insists the letter was definitely delivered, but she insists she wants to see the Countess of Briarton. Hearing this, the Baroness was surprised and ordered her to be removed from there immediately, as she considered it rude. Inez says that because of her mistress, Jason made a scene at her estate in front of everyone, and therefore did not want people to talk about her, because she said that she wanted to see her and then offered to let her do this and release Mistress Jason. When Charlotte entered the house, she thought that Inez had let her in, and that she had walked all the way there and considered her friend a naive fool who could not do anything without her. Charlotte thanks the lady for agreeing to meet her, and then says that she believes there was a misunderstanding between them. Inez suggests discussing everything in order, and they'll start by correcting their titles. Then she explains that they're both titled aristocrats, and so she'll politely call her by her title, Baroness. The main character invites her to sit down since this is a tea party that she so wanted to attend. Charlotte says that if you think about it, she's now got her title back, which means she'll soon be happy. Lady says that's quite likely, as she believes there are limits to what a representative can do. The Baroness says it's hard to imagine how with her busy schedule, she managed to find time for tea. Inez says she's very grateful for the invitation and hopes they'll see each other more often in the future. The lady turns to Viscountess Field and says she heard her father recently opened a ceramics import business. Aladi, with her black hair, asks in surprise if this news has reached her. The Countess replies that of course this is true, because she has heard that the scale of the enterprise is quite large, and therefore hopes that they will give the Briarton family the opportunity to invest in it. The Viscountess enthusiastically says they would be immensely grateful if she decided to invest in their enterprise. Then she asks if she's heard that the Duke of Sussex attended the latest meeting of the House of Lords. At this time, Charlotte thought about everything they were talking about, and if it were like before, then she would be at the center of the discussion and not someone like Inez. The Marquise says that this is exactly how it was last time, and upon hearing this, the girl with red hair throws her cup of tea on the floor. The mistress asks Mrs. Jason what she allows herself to do, and Charlotte, screaming, explains that they are pretending that she does not exist for them, and then turns to Inez and claims that she told everyone to ignore her and talk about things unfamiliar to her. The Countess says she has no idea what she's talking about. Then she asks why she'd act so childishly, because even if this nonsense were true, she wonders if anyone here has any reason to listen to her, and at that moment, she thought it was funny. Inez says the reason she so quickly took center stage was because she introduced her to her personal acquaintances and didn't realize that this was only possible in conversations about topics she knew something about. However, she didn't want it to be that way. The Countess says that she knows that her friend lives in a world as insensitive as she was when she had an affair with her husband, and then claims that it would be good to pretend sometimes. The landlady says that she let Countess Briarton in out of kindness, and then says that her appearance here today is in itself a disappointment. Charlotte says that's not what she meant, but the Baroness doesn't want to hear her anymore and orders Jason to be taken out of her house. Charlotte turns to Inez and says that she will still see because she will not destroy her. The owner says that she doesn't understand what kind of person this is, and that they think she's crazy. Mary asks her mistress if she's back yet. Inez asks if she's been very late and kept her waiting. Then she asks the maid why she's so upset. Mary asks the hostess for forgiveness and explains that during the day, Mrs. Charlotte came to her looking for her, and she insulted and drove her away. But she believes that this lady was a friend of the hostess and therefore asks for forgiveness for being so impolite, and then says that she will accept any punishment. Hearing this, Inez hugged the maid and said that it was she who should ask for forgiveness, because she believed that the person who cared about her so much was very close. But she did not notice and wasted her life trying to keep up with the attention of other people. The main character says that her deeds were the most important thing, and she is so stupid that she couldn't even properly thank those who were always there and supported her. The maid informs her mistress that she received a letter while she was away. Upon hearing this, the lady surprised asks who it is from. She replies that it is from the Duke of Sussex and His Excellency. The king asks his younger brother what he's thinking about, as if he's not talking to him. He replies that it's nothing special, but the master is dubious and insists that it doesn't seem like that. Enoch explains that he said that there was nothing special, and then asks why he was picking on him, and also asks if he wants a specific answer. Edward smiled and said he even spoke to the king like that now. The boy explained that it was a private conversation and therefore considered him just a brother to him now. His Majesty asks why his brother is so sensitive, and then asks if it is because of the Countess of Brereton. Enoch says it's not true at all. The older brother asks why he's so unhappy then, and if it's because the recipient didn't reply to his passionate letter. And then he thinks he'd meant to tease him, but it seems that's true. At this time, the guy thought that during their last meeting, it seemed that the Countess was uncomfortable being with him, and although the portrait was only a reason for the meeting, the Countess could refuse to paint it at any time. The young gentleman understands that if this happens, it will become much more difficult to see the Countess. At this time, the Queen comes to them, and then asks for forgiveness for being late, and asks if they discussed something interesting. She also asks what they talked about. The king explains that they were talking about the Countess of Brereton. Helena says that lately, wherever you look, the Countess is being discussed. Then she turns to the Duke and says she has a big favor to ask of him, and asks if he will do her a favor. Her Majesty says that soon she and Calderoff will organize an exhibition on international exchange. Calderoff. The country for a long time was at war and then making peace with Lancaster, and historians called the longest war the 100 Years' War. At the end of the 100 Years' War, the countries exchanged delegations to establish friendly relations. The King of Lancaster, who participated in the peace negotiations, was a great admirer of the arts. Lancaster quickly became a place where artists interacted under the auspices of the royal family. This marked the beginning of international exchange exhibitions. Of course, now they have turned into a field of hostility between the two states over which country will show itself better at the exhibition. The Duke says that as far as he knows, there have been no exhibitions in recent years, and he is wondering if there is any reason to hold one this year. The Queen explains that in the eyes of other countries, although the last generation has become slightly less noticeable, Lancaster still remains a conservative country relying on the aristocracy. Helen argues that the world is changing, and the times of closed doors and closed discussions are ending as the era of the young and ambitious is coming. Her Majesty says Lancaster needs to change its conservative ways in the face of this new era, and she believes the International Exchange Exhibition will be a great place to demonstrate this. The Queen says it will be a cultural event that will shake up the whole country, and that's why she's hoping for Elton's help. Enoch asks if he can recommend an artist. Hearing this, the Queen was surprised, and then asked if the Duke of Sussex himself recommended the artist, and she was interested in who it was. The young gentleman replies that it's Countess Brereton, and he assures her that her talent and taste are exceptionally fine. He then points out that among all the artists who participated in the exchange exhibitions, not a single woman was involved, and he believes that would be a mockery of Calderoff. Her Majesty says that this will be enough to suppress the indignation of the artistic community, since she considers the Countess an exceptional artist. The king said that was excellent, and in that case, He would leave the organization of the exhibition to them. Enoch thanked them and then departed. Her Majesty turns to her husband and says that this is a fresh idea, since she believes that he was worried and thought over every action he took in the palace with a perpetually confused expression on his face. The king says he's never heard his brother speak of anyone with such enthusiasm. He thinks his perpetually apologetic brother has grown up to be such a wonderful man. Helena says that they don't know the Duke's feelings, so she suggests simply supporting him. When the main character received the letter from His Excellency, she thought about how she couldn't avoid him forever. She thought it was her problem that she was being cautious around him, and that it would seem strange if she constantly avoided him, since he had done nothing wrong. The butler entered the room and apologized, then announced that he had brought the documents she had requested. He asked what had made her interested in the budget reports. The lady replies that she's considering getting rid of the rat holes because she believes that all the investments Ryan made as head of the family were squandered by the Briarton family's wealth on his unprofitable businesses. The main character believes that this is too much of a sum for him to pay child support, and therefore she will try to get this investment back. As Ryan sat in the buffet, he overheard others talking about how he'd lost his property and his earldom and been banished from the earldom. He was deeply angry, not understanding what he'd done to deserve such treatment. Viscount Gott understood that the Count's wealth and reputation were in his hands, and he did not understand why Inez would change so quickly. The men approached Ryan and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and then said that, judging by his appearance, he was having a hard time right now. Another man says he thought the Viscount couldn't bear the shame of the divorce and committed suicide, and then asks if he's wrong. The gentleman says that in all of Lancaster, he is the only one who is divorced and a complete loser. Hearing this, Ryan objects and screams, saying that he crawled at his feet when he was the Earl of Briarton and then grabs him by the shirt. The man says that everything is correct and then hits him in the face and says that this is exactly how it was when he was the Earl of Briarton, and then claims that now he is nothing. The gentleman asks how many tears Baroness Jason shed since he seduced her first, and she did not resist because she did not know what to do. Ryan was surprised to hear this, and the man said that now wherever he goes, everyone is talking about it and wondering if he knew. At this time, the Viscount thought that Charlotte was already infuriated by the fact that because of her, he divorced Inez, and she was also spreading this outrageous lie behind his back. Ryan leaves, and the man asks where he is going, and then asks if he ran to beg the Countess to take him back. Walking down the street, the Viscount says that his face hurts, and his lip is also cracked. Suddenly, someone grabbed him by the shoulder, and when he turned around, he saw his older brother. His brother asked him what he was doing and how he even ended up getting divorced. Ryan says he stopped asking questions because he's already crushed. The gentleman says he's crazy and asks if he's grasped the situation. Then, he announces that today, the Briarton family announced they are withdrawing all investments in their family business. The Viscount says the business is already going under, then asks what will happen without investment, believing the Gotts will end up on the street. He asks how Ryan could have let things get this way. The older brother asks who could have thought that he would get divorced, and also wonders how he could have driven such a compliant woman to the point that she demanded a divorce. Ryan asks what to do now, and suggests following the developments since the whole country is now interested in divorces. The gentleman says that he can send a gift to his wife, and thereby lift her spirits. The next day, the maids show the mistress a teddy bear, and she asks in surprise if it is a gift from Viscount Gott. The maid says that he said that he personally chose it for her. Inez thought that the withdrawal of investments had scared him quite a bit, and that he thought it was just nonsense that he had chosen it himself, and she wondered if men thought that women would be happy with just toys. The mistress offers the maids the chance to take the teddy bear and do whatever she wants with it. Hearing this, the maids are delighted and thank the lady. The main character remembered that Mary had told her to take a walk a long time ago, and it seemed that she gave her strength. The lady understands that the portrait of His Excellency is almost finished, but she believes it needs to be completed, although it's a shame that on the other hand it's a relief. After all, getting closer to His Highness would only be detrimental due to all the problems. Inez realized the carriage was ready and that these meetings would end today. And when she reached the main hall, she realized His Highness hadn't yet appeared. The girl thought that if she looked at it from this angle, It was the same angle from which she had seen Ryan and Charlotte, and she realized that this was the very place full of color, and the people were also delightfully colorful. The main character thought that the very thought of this place made her shudder, but now it makes her smile, and therefore she thinks it's surprising, because the only thing that has changed is the person she meets there. Enoch greeted the lady and said he had something to say today. She asked what it was. The gentleman says that he didn't sleep all night and was worried that the portrait would turn out badly. Hearing this, the main character wondered if he was making fun of her right now. Then she suggested he not worry, because even if His Excellency hadn't slept all night, he was still handsome. Inez reports that the work on the portrait is almost complete, and she only has to finish the details, and she thinks that he will no longer have to bother visiting her studio. Enoch says that it turns out that today was their last meeting. The main character says that although the work is unfinished, she asks if he'd like to look at it. He replies that he'll put it off until it's finished, then asks the Countess if she ever received a box of chocolates with nuts and fruits and various fillings as a child. Inez says she knows having received these candies as a child. Her favorite flavor was chocolate with caramel filling. The gentleman says his mother only allowed him one a day. Hearing this, the main character thought that His Excellency was talking about such personal things for the first time. Enoch asks her what candy she thinks he ate first. She asks if his favorite was the caramel-filled one, and he replies that, on the contrary, he ate the caramel-filled ones last, and even waiting to eat them was fun. The Duke says that for him, her painting is like these caramel candies, because he likes to just wait, and therefore he would like to enjoy it a little longer. The Countess says that his words make her happy, and then suggests that they finish for today, as she needs to visit the art store, because she has run out of drawing materials. Enoch says that there is nothing to be done then, and he wants to go with her. The young gentleman says that he hasn't been there for a long time, and the street is as busy as before. Inez asks the Duke why he went with her. He asks if she forgot she owed him lunch. At that moment, the girl thought he'd been joking, and she hadn't taken it seriously. The Duke asks what she's doing. At this point, the lady reflects on her decision to break off relations with His Excellency. The girl says that they need to hurry to buy everything they need and make it to dinner. Inez looked at her notes and said that they still needed to buy paint from Mrs. Land's workshop. Upon seeing the lady, the saleswoman, surprised, says she's the Countess of Brereton. The lady claims she must have seen the article in Elton, before then suggests calling her Inez as before, since she wants to be her friend. And the Duke suggests calling him Mr. Enoch as before. The young gentleman was surprised that there was a restaurant in such a place, and the girl explained that Miss Land told her about this place. Inez asks if this is unexpected. Then she says she's actually a little worried, because he only goes to high-end restaurants. He says he won't deny it, but he'll be happy anywhere as long as the Countess of Brighton is with him. Hearing this, the main character does not understand where he learned such shameless words. His Excellency says that when they met this morning, he couldn't tell her everything he wanted. And now, it seems they won't be able to see each other for a while. And then it's announced that an exchange exhibition with the Kingdom of Calderoff will soon take place, and a truly grand event will be held. The girl, surprised, asks if he's talking about the exchange exhibition. He explains that Her Majesty the Queen is organizing the event, and he's decided to help her. Hearing this, the main character thought that, thank God, they would not be able to see each other only temporarily. And at this time, she realized that she should not react like that, because today is their last meeting, and she has already decided that she will keep her distance from His Excellency. Inez doesn't understand why she continues to cling to him. Then she asks if this is the exchange exhibition that took place many years ago, and as far as she remembers, the last time it was held at Calderoff. The gentleman says that's true, and Lancaster's results weren't very good, since their delegation returned home, impressed by the free spirit of Calderoff's work. And this blow to their pride served as the impetus for the founding of the Royal Society of Artists. Inez says that he must be very busy, and then asks to let her know if she can help with anything, since she doesn't mind at all, because His Excellency helped her a lot. Enoch says that's true. The waiter asks if they're ready to order. The waiter replies that they haven't decided yet, and the man says they have delicious grilled salmon at their restaurant. After a while, their order arrived, and Enoch, surprised, asked if it was all for one person. The lady explained that this was a restaurant frequented mostly by artists with limited savings. Inez smiled and then apologized, because it was a little unusual for her to see such an expression on his face, because His Excellency usually does not change his facial expression, and sometimes he is angry, puzzled, sad. And then she apologizes for this misunderstanding. The gentleman explains that he is actually a more emotional person than she thinks, especially when he is with her. Enoch claims that Artist Street is a very strange place, and he thought Lancastrian art belonged exclusively to the upper class. Ordinary people didn't even have access to an art education. The girl says that so many like-minded artists have gathered on this street, and it's surprising, but she thinks that they are not necessarily united by a common origin. The lady says that commoners like her as a girl did not receive a proper education, and believes that this is perhaps why people like them cannot stop wanting to draw. Ines asks why they don't hold an artist exhibition on this street, as she thinks it would be a shame to miss such an opportunity. The main character says that everyone has the desire to enjoy art, regardless of social status, but ordinary people very rarely get such a chance. The Countess claims that if the exchange exhibition is organized as a street festival of artists, and not only aristocrats, but also ordinary people can visit it, then she asks if this is true. The lady says this format will help quell the perception that Lancaster's art is old-fashioned, considering it a kind of revenge match for losing the last exhibition. And the influx of visitors will boost profits for the shops on the artist's street, and she wonders if that's a good thing. Inez understands that there may be resistance from residents, but it can be mitigated with appropriate compensation. The main character thinks that it is worth establishing reasonable compensation for shop owners, and asks how about the artists from here participating in the exchange exhibition. At this time, she thought that she was so excited that she overdid it. The gentleman says it's not a bad idea because Artist Street is a place worth spending money on. She thanks him for his words. Enoch reports that he cannot say anything for sure yet because he must first discuss everything with Her Majesty the Queen. The Duke thanks the lady and says that she has come up with a really fresh idea, and it will be a great help. When the lady said goodbye, the Duke thought that he would like to meet her like this again. The main character thought that the work on the portrait was almost finished, and she would no longer be able to meet him in person. And she was sad about this again, and thought that it was useless to think about it. Sometime later, she received an unexpected invitation. Queen Helena wrote that she would like to have a cup of tea with her alone. The girl was surprised to hear this. The butler announced that Countess Inez Brereton had arrived. At that moment, the girl realized that she had indeed arrived at the palace alone. The Queen says she wishes to appoint the Countess of Briarton to the exchange and exhibition delegation. She believes that with her dazzling artistic talent, she hopes she will join them so that Lancastrian art can continue to develop and reach new heights. The main character thought this was a great opportunity to restore her reputation, damaged by everything that happened with her ex-husband, and she doesn't understand why Her Majesty the Queen chose her. Enoch turns to the Countess and tells her they've met again. At this point, she thinks they've clearly decided to test her with this meeting. Inez asks how he is. The gentleman replies that he is fine. The lady asks if he knows why she was appointed a delegate to the exchange exhibition. The gentleman asks if this makes her uncomfortable, and the girl says it's a great honor for her. Hearing this, the Queen says she's also pleased, but if the Countess doesn't want this, and she's forcing it, then she should apologize. The lady says she is glad to meet, and then suggests going into the room and talking. Like a torch lighting the night in Lancaster, the noble Queen Helena. But the real Queen Helena was very different from such a nickname. The woman says she has heard that the Queen is actively trying to change the closed atmosphere and politics in Lancaster. The main character reflected on how honored she would be to drink tea with such a man. The Queen said she heard the Countess had suggested a great idea for the exhibition, but the young lady didn't realize how long it had been since they had discussed it. The Countess says that she likes the format of an exchange exhibition, in which everyone, regardless of background, can freely participate, because she thinks it would be nice to do an exhibition like that. The Queen asks how anyone could refuse such a good idea, and then says that she personally appointed her as a member of the delegation, because she understands that wealth alone is not enough, and in the end, she thought that this was a suitable opportunity to demonstrate their artistic talent. Her Majesty says that, frankly, she's even a little envious of the Countess. Then she reveals that the Archduke of Sussex has praised her highly, saying she's a very talented artist, so she should definitely be sent to the exhibition. Enoch blushed and said that he had said nothing but the truth, and then asked if anyone was against it, and asserted that he had no intention of denying that the Countess was a wonderful artist. The main character understands that His Excellency is involved in this matter. The Queen says she wanted to see you today anyway, and details will be discussed separately soon. She wishes you luck with the exchange exhibition. Inez thanks Her Majesty for the opportunity. The Queen says that she will conclude their tea party with this, as the Duke is very busy preparing and will not disturb him. Then she turns to Enoch and says that His Majesty has been looking for him. The Duke says he doesn't think it's that urgent. And Helena says he said he wanted to talk to his younger brother today, and even postponed the government meeting. Enoch wished the lady a good time, and then left. Her Majesty says he looked so sorry, and then asks the Countess if they would like to have tea together. The lady says that would be a great honor for her. Helena thought back to when she first saw Countess Inez Brereton, and when she first met her at a social event, she'd thought she was a weak lady. Now she wondered how much the atmosphere around her had changed. Her Majesty wondered if this change in the Countess's character had attracted the Archduke of Sussex, and whether she thought she should then help them both. The Queen says that, as she said earlier, the Archduke truly has a high opinion of her. Inez, surprised, asks why she thinks so. Helena believes that the Countess has feelings for the Archduke, and then she says that this is the first time she will see the Archduke care about someone so much. Inez says she thought he was kind from the start. The Queen suggests that perhaps others will never know why the Archduke owns Elton and what he sacrificed for his older brother, His Majesty the King. The Queen says that if she doesn't mind, they can talk about the Archduke's past. Then she explains that from a young age the second prince was an exceptional child, so much so that he threatened the first prince's succession. Many people were ready to follow him, and at least the Archduke, whom they and His Majesty only knew, was a child who was afraid that he would be hated. When Enoch turned 8, his teacher told him he had nothing more to teach him. Hearing this, the boy wondered if his brother would praise him too. The boy saw that the Parliament session had already ended, and the man asked if it was too early to appoint Edward as Crown Prince, and he thought that these nobles were crazy because something needed to be discussed separately in the palace, and then asked if he was the only one who thought so. The minister says that everyone is blaming Prince Enoch, and he says that of course Prince Edward is also talented, but he cannot be compared to Prince Enoch. The gentleman says that he is very sorry that he is just talking, and thinks that at this time it would be worth strengthening the royal power, and then asks if it is too late to make Enoch the crown prince. The boy reflected that it wasn't always a good thing to be outstanding, and at that moment the voices of those who wanted the second prince to become crown prince grew louder and louder. Of course, the previous king and queen did not want to sow discord between the princes, and they were determined to have the current king ascend the throne. The ceremony was held as planned. The prince said he had no interest in the title of crown prince, and therefore his brother would now have no reason to hate him. However, even after the crown prince's inauguration, some interests did not simply disappear. The second prince was forced to abandon his beloved fencing after rumors circulated that he was plotting an assassination attempt on the crown prince. Nannies and teachers kept changing because they tried to instill strange ideas in the second prince. And after such suffering, he suffered again, and several years passed since everything calmed down. Finally, the Duke of Sussex grew into an open and caring man, and he eventually became Elton's owner. The Queen says he did this to demonstrate his indifference to the throne. Her Majesty reports that in fact, since he became interested in Elton, he has fewer close people and at least fewer political figures. Helena thinks that maybe that's the issue. Even though he pretends he's not the Duke, he really values Elton. Then she mentions that the newspaper has repeatedly published articles about the Countess and asks if that angers her. The Queen states that only articles based on solid evidence have made it into print. And does this fact not give the Duke of Sussex reason to consider her Countess a sensible person? After all, she believes so. Her Majesty reports that she does not yet know what this means, whether she has any special plans, and thought that the Duke is very polite and impeccable with everyone, but this politeness is to some extent a huge wall with which he fenced himself off from everyone. Helena believes that he made a calculation to complicate the situation without letting anyone know his weak points. I think that this may not work at all because Countess Briarton is truly an outstanding artist. The queen muses that perhaps he too will be able to fully express his emotions while around the countess. She then explains that she didn't want to burden her, but since the Duke has rather high expectations of her, she wanted her to know that hers are high too. The main character claims that she wants to live up to His Excellency's expectations for his faith in her because she wants to see His Excellency's happy smile. Inez asserts that she will try not to disappoint His Excellency and Her Majesty, and will therefore do everything in her power. Walking down the corridor, the lady wonders if she said something stupid because she was nervous. Suddenly, a man grabs her hand and asks if she is by any chance the Countess of Briarton. Seeing him, Inez remembered Helena's words about how it didn't matter, that it was the Queen's order to appoint her as the exhibition manager. It was a rather unusual beginning, and therefore some managers were not too happy with this decision. Among them, the one who holds the highest esteem is the Marquis Usher, head of the Royal Institution of Artists. He is the one who is most dissatisfied with the appointment of the exhibition's manager. The gentleman says that he could not even imagine that he would meet a lady in such a place, and then asks how she is doing and what business she has come to the palace for. Inez replies that she has come to greet the Queen after her appointment as manager of the exchange exhibition. Asher says he is so glad that outstanding artists like her will be working for the glory of their country. Hearing this, the main character thought he was more pleasant than she expected. The gentleman said he'd kept the busy lady so long, then suggested she take care of herself, and left. The head of the Royal Association smiled and said that being appointed to such a position by the Queen is like receiving a parachute, and he thinks that this girl is cunning as a fox, and didn't even think that she looks such a simpleton. The man tells the Marquis that they still need to be careful because they don't know what aces she has hidden up her sleeve. Asher says that with a reputation earned by the Royal Association of Artists, she is a woman who only arranges flowers around the house and will not say a word against it. His Majesty asks why he is so late, and then says that he was waiting. Enoch apologized for keeping him waiting. The king asks if he's angry because he's interrupting his meeting with the countess. The young gentleman asks how he can be of service. The elder brother says that this exchange exhibition is causing his wife a lot of inconvenience, and his brother, who clearly separates private and public affairs, asked for a favor, and therefore thinks that the countess looks like a fairly reliable person, and asks if this is true. The duke asks if the queen hasn't already shared the countess's ideas. The king replies that she considers them quite novel, and that he never even considered holding an exchange exhibition in a place frequented primarily by the common people. Enoch reports that he too, thanks to Graphene, visited this street for the first time and thought a lot about it because he is from a royal family and of course should know every corner of their country. The young gentleman says he feels there are many places in their country he knows nothing about. The elder brother says he must at least admit that the Countess of Briarton has a good influence on him. The king says that he had not been particularly interested in the surroundings before, and that he was not interested in anything at all, and then asks if that is not so. His Majesty reports that he always makes a stupid face whenever the Countess is mentioned. Enoch asks since when he speaks such simple language. The king thought that his brother was slowly realizing, and thought that it was time for him to stop teasing, and then asked who else had such a generous brother. When the lady was getting into the carriage, Enoch decided to see her off. He said he thought the lady would go straight home, then explained that he wanted to say hello, and asked if it was a burden to her that he spoke like that. Inez objects, and says that she should have been looking for him to greet him, and then reports that she was allowed to participate in the exhibition. The young gentleman claims she was allowed to participate because she has outstanding talent. The girl says, however, that His Excellency strongly recommended her to the Queen, and she believes that if things had gone as they had before, she would not have achieved these goals. The main character understands that if it were Ryan, and he not only did not betray her ideas to the Queen, he would say that they belonged to him. The girl thought that she needed to stop thinking about Ryan. The young gentleman looked at the lady and wondered if she was really remembering Viscount Gott now. After all, he understood that not much time had passed since the divorce, and believed that it was impossible to stop remembering her ex-husband so quickly. The Duke says he was delighted to talk to her again and looks forward to working with her. She says she's looking forward to it too. After some time, the headlines in Elton were full of news about the exchange exhibition with Calderoff, with the participation of the manager, Countess Briarton. Upon reading this, Ryan cried out and asked how this had happened. He couldn't believe a woman had been appointed to manage a state event, and he wondered if the royal family really valued Inez's talent so highly. The Viscount thought that if only he had not divorced Inez, then the fame that had now fallen on her, the respect of the royal family, and the envy of people and all this would have been his. Ryan understands that his family's company is crumbling due to the withdrawal of investments, and his ruined reputation means he can't even borrow money. However, he believes this can't be allowed to happen, and that he needs to somehow get back together with Inez. The Viscount asks where such a rule exists, since the exhibition has always been organized by the Royal Association of Artists. The man doesn't understand how an inexperienced countess could be appointed to such a position, or what the Queen was even thinking. Asher suggests people watch their words, as the right to appoint managers of the exchange exhibition belongs exclusively to the royal family, and his comment could be considered treason against the royal family. The man says he does have doubts about this appointment. He thinks it would be good if the countess knew her place and didn't interfere, but if that doesn't happen, they'll do as they see fit, since he understands they don't want the exchange exhibition to go smoothly. At this time, the main character thought that it was the first organizational meeting, and everything should be perfect. When Enoch saw the lady, he asked if she was heading to a meeting. She replied that she was so excited because this was her first will, and a meeting with the team that had been organizing for a long time. The gentleman asks why she should worry, since he thinks that she will do everything in the best possible way. Asher says they're getting started, then explains that they know there are less than 2 months left until the exchange exhibition with Calderoff, so they don't have much time and suggests they hurry. The head of the Artists Association says that he hopes that they will do everything possible to ensure that the event goes smoothly, and then announces that this exhibition will take place, but the young lady interrupts him and says that she has a proposal. Inez reports that she thinks this exhibition should be held in the form of a festival. The lady says that in the past exchange exhibitions have been held in the royal court's premises, featuring pre-selected works. The girl asks, what if they move the event to the Street of Masters? Because she believes that anyone can take part, and everyone will be free to enjoy the works of art. The main character says that this way the exhibition will become an event where everyone will not only know, but also have a good time. Hearing this, the gentleman smiled, and then apologized, saying she was being so absurd. He believed that, whatever the case, and that she was new to the organizing committee, she still hadn't realized that an exchange exhibition is an event that mobilizes people and should generate income. Therefore, he believed that this wouldn't change for a couple of days. Inez says she has already prepared a detailed plan and budget. The man asks what she is saying, because he can't even imagine how this event can take place on Master Street, and then asks if this isn't a place for the poor. The gentleman wonders if it wouldn't be humiliating to show such a place to important foreign guests. Then he says he's somewhat disappointed. The man says the Royal Association of Artists worked hard on the exchange exhibitions, but as soon as she was appointed to the organizing committee, she decided to change. The Countess says that she had no such intentions, and then asks why they are picking on her. Enoch says this year's exhibition will also be a step toward reforming Lancaster's image on the international stage. He believes that differences between this exhibition and previous ones are inevitable. Hearing this, the gentleman thought that the Duke began to help her, and he took her side because he represents the royal family. Inez explains that she is not saying that the exhibition format created by the association needs to be completely changed, since she believes that they will be able to come to an agreement at today's meeting. Hearing this, the man slams his hand on the table and then asks why change the exhibition's format, which is working so well. He claims that even without the Countess's participation, the exhibition would have been a success. The Duke says that this is strange, and if you look at how things are going now at the moment, the exchange exhibitions held by the association have not yielded significant results, and then asks if this is true. The head of the exhibition asks whether this is a statement, and whether he can consider it a disdain for His Excellency's association. Asher says he understood him perfectly well, and that since he's so confident, he can't be of any further use. He asserts that the Royal Institution of Artists will not participate in the exchange exhibition. The gentleman asks the Marquis usher if everything is all right, because he cannot believe that they are leaving the organizing committee. Asher says this is a warning to the Countess of Briarton, who barged in unknowingly, and to the Duke of Sussex. He says there are about 2 weeks left until the exchange exhibition. Then he asks what the two will manage to accomplish in that time without the help of the former organizing committee members. The Marquis says that he does not envy their situation, because he believes that they will take a step back and wait for the remains of the Countess of Briarton. At this time, the young gentleman tells the Countess not to worry, because he believes that even without the Artists' Association, they will be able to organize the exhibition well. The main character thought that the association's refusal to be part of the exhibition's organizing committee meant that the association's artist members would also boycott the exhibition. Inez understands that there are only 2 weeks left until the exhibition, and believes that it will be almost impossible to persuade them to participate in the exhibition during this time. The Countess apologizes for the fact that she was given such a good chance, and she ruined everything. Enoch says that in that case, he'll prove to her that they can organize an excellent exhibition on their own. Then he asks if those who left the committee didn't say they wouldn't provide any assistance. The gentleman claims they'll create such outstanding events that their existence will be forgotten. And besides, Lancaster is full of other remarkable artists, besides the association's members. The main character remembered the artists from the Street of Workshops. She thought they would give local artists a chance to become famous by participating in a major event. Enoch says he'll take care of the external factors, and the Countess simply needs to focus on the exhibition itself. He says that urgent matters need to be addressed first. At this time, Inez thought that she felt pressure, because he cared about her so much, and therefore believed that perhaps they would be able to achieve their plans. The lady believes that then she too is obliged to do everything in her power to justify His Majesty's expectations. Full-scale preparations for the exchange exhibition have begun, and the lady thought it most important to provide adequate compensation to the residents of the Workshop Street. The protagonist understands that even though the space will be rented for the festival, it's still a residential area. She believes the exhibition shouldn't create inconvenience for local residents, as they are obligated to create a good candidate so they can rent the space again in the future if necessary. The Countess says that residents' consent and compensation must be prioritized, and then a survey conducted among them. That's why she hired administrators, because she had a lot to do. The assistant informs the lady that she has a list of artists willing to participate in the exhibition. The Countess says she will approve the candidates after reviewing them, and thinks the preparations are going better than she thought. Inez says they even have unused budget funds that can be reported to the Queen. The Duke asks if the preparations are going well. The girl replies that it's thanks to him. Then she explains that there are many difficulties, as this is her first time organizing, and without his support, she would have given up long ago. Enoch asks in surprise if that's really true. The lady looks at him thinking he's embarrassed, then says she never imagined he was such a hard worker. She asks if there's anything he can't do. The gentleman asks her to stop saying such things, and the lady asks if he's completely incapable of accepting compliments. Enoch claims that everything depends on the one who gave the compliment. Hearing this, the main character burst out laughing. The gentleman surprised asks if it's really that funny. Inez explains that she's not making fun of him. She's just discovered how sweet he can be. He says it's the first time he's forgiven. The main character thought about how she was very worried at first, but thanks to His Majesty, she was able to fulfill everything she had planned because she wants the exchange exhibition to be a success. At this time in the kingdom of Kaldorov, servants are constantly looking for the young master. Mistress Kreha asks what's wrong. The servant explains that the Lancaster ship is ready, but His Majesty is nowhere to be found. The lady screams and calls for His Majesty, and also asks where he ran off to, since she believes that they really have no time now. Prince Kaldorov, Selden Kaldorov, says that he does not want to go anywhere because he thinks it is very boring there. The Queen says with delight that she has not seen such a perfect report in 100 years. The Countess says that she is too kind, but Her Majesty objects and claims that nothing of the sort is true, as she believes that the two of them have truly done an excellent job. The Duke asks what about the Royal Artists Association. Helena explains that this was an unexpected turn of events, as they thought they could completely control the organizing committee if they declared a full-scale boycott. Her Majesty says that everything did not go as they planned, because they protested day and night. And of course, she does not intend to take the side of these infantile artists. Inez understands that she needs to be tough. The Queen suggests they watch together and then asks if they've found partners for the banquet yet. The exchange exhibition is a 3-day event that ends with a banquet held at the royal palace. The main character says she's so embarrassed because she was only busy preparing the event. The Queen says that in that case, they could go to the banquet together as partners. She thought that since they were the organizers of this exhibition, it would be easier if they went to the banquet together. At this point, the young lady is at a loss as to what to do, as she never imagined she would be invited in this manner. She realizes that His Excellency looks shocked. Enoch turns to the Countess and says that Her Majesty's offer to go with her to the banquet cannot be refused, but if it does not suit her, then she should not be afraid to refuse. Inez thanks him for his concern and says she understands he means His Excellency, then announces that everything is fine. She'll go with him as his partner. Since the Queen herself suggested it, it's essential for the success of the exchange exhibition, and it's truly very rational. The young gentleman says it's good she accepted the offer for the sake of the exhibition's success, and the lady insists that's exactly how it is. Enoch says he's glad she agreed to go with him. He suggests they return to their office and finish preparing for the exhibition. At this point, the protagonist thought about the doubts that were gnawing at her heart because it was the Queen's own proposal. She also believed she hadn't used this as a reason to accept the offer and go with him. The Calderoff delegation arrived in Lankaras. Creja thanked His Majesty for the invitation. He said there had been rumors that the prince himself would be among the delegation this time, but he saw that no one there looked like a prince. The lady says it was just a rumor, and at this point, she doesn't understand where His Excellency the Prince is, since she prevented him from running and forced him to board a ship to Lancaster. But the young gentleman fled as soon as they arrived at the port. Inez is trying to figure out if everything is ready for tomorrow's exhibition on the artist's street. But suddenly, she sees a group of people and doesn't understand the noise. The prince explains that this paint dries completely in the light, and then he draws it on paper and offers to examine it. The man is surprised because the color has changed and says he didn't know it was paint with such an effect. He returns the warehouse to us, saying the pigment is very weak. Selden wonders if the seller explained how to use this paint before selling it, and then asks what this simple stroke is. He offers to trade it all for goods from Calderoff. Inez asks if he is from the Calderoff delegation, and says that she is pleased to meet him, since she heard that the delegation arrived this morning, and she did not expect that he would immediately begin to inspect the venue. The young gentleman asks if this is the location of the exhibition, and also wonders if this year's exhibition is not at the Royal Palace. The lady replies that this year they decided to change the organization of the exhibition, and judging by his words, he is well versed in art, and therefore hopes that he will enjoy the event. The prince says the atmosphere here is different from the Lancaster exhibitions he's heard about before. The lady says that, although he is not an admirer of Lancaster's modest art, she hopes that he will appreciate its elegance. The king and queen welcomed the delegation. The queen thanked His Royal Majesty for the invitation. The king said they were pleased to be hosting an exhibition that promotes peaceful cooperation between their countries. The Queen says they may well change their specific expectations for this year's exhibition, as they understand it will be very different from previous ones. The delegation's representative says that, if His Majesty says so, they eagerly await the exhibition. The Queen invites them to the apartments prepared for them. At this time, the main character asks in surprise, "What do you mean by boring?" and also wonders if he is talking about their art. The young gentleman asks in surprise if this is not so, and then says that if you look at modern paintings, the outdated style of Lancaster painting is naturally perceived as a relic of the past. Inez claims that the Lancaster style is appealing due to its elegance conveyed by soft tones, and that this is called classic. Then she asks if this means Lancaster is boring. The young gentleman claims that in painting a combination of bright colors and intense brushstrokes is necessary as in the art of Calderoff. The lady suggests not arguing, but seeing everything tomorrow at the exhibition. After all, on Master Street, where the exhibition is being held, they'll meet a huge number of artists. Sheldon says he doesn't have time to sightsee. Hearing this, she asks surprised if he didn't come to the exhibition. However, the man remains silent. At this time, the girl left, and the young gentleman thought that in Lancaster everyone had problems with their heads. A few days ago, a young gentleman asked his father why he should go to Lancaster. King Demos asks if he is comfortable living there. After Edward was crowned, the Lancastrian monarchy was shaken, as many nobles wanted to see Enoch, the king's younger brother, as king. Demos believes that it goes without saying that he has no claims to the throne, but he believes that now the king needs to strengthen his power, because those who wanted to see Enoch as king could rebel. The prince asks what's wrong with Togo. The father asks his son to go and take a closer look at the king, as he's curious how well King Edward controls his country and whether Enoch really isn't interested in the throne. The king believes there may be internal forces holding back the schism. The prince asks if he's specifically referring to the internal conflict within Lancaster. His Majesty explains that he could reignite the century-old war with Calderoff, and so he sends his son on a mission to take a closer look at Lancaster. The father says that Sheldon is the most selfish of his children, and then asks if he's not a member of the royal family. The prince says he will carry out his orders. The king asks his son if he's still interested in painting. He replies that he isn't, but his father says that's what artists do, and suggests that he no longer be distracted from his duties as a member of the royal family, as he had been in his childhood. At this time, the young gentleman thought that the full-scale exhibition begins tomorrow, and he will begin by looking at the handsome face of the king. Enoch asks the countess where she's been, as he was worried. The lady apologizes and explains that she was making a final inspection of the Alley of Craftsmen. He says it's good that there are no remaining problems, and the delegation has arrived safely and been accommodated in their apartments. Hearing this, the main character thought that the guy she met might also be from the delegation. After all, his expressions were somewhat harsh, but he seemed genuinely interested in painting and liked Calderoff's style. The lady approaches His Excellency and proposes making this year's exhibition incredibly interesting. After all this hard work, the exchange exhibition opens tomorrow. The king greeted the representatives of Calderoff and said that he was glad that this year the exchange ceremony for the king took place as usual. At this point, the prince's mouth widened, and Mrs. Creha asked what His Majesty was doing. Sheldon said no one had seen him anyway, then suggested not calling him that, as he believed rumors would spread that he was a prince. The young gentleman says that he actually doesn't want anyone to find out about this ahead of time, and suggests that it would be better to tell what the atmosphere was like in the palace where she was yesterday. Creha says that because of the upcoming ceremony, some people's opinions were divided, and several people from the aristocracy left the management group. The prince, surprised, asks if the king himself appoints this group. She replies that this is true, but because of the queen, someone undesirable was apparently appointed. Sheldon asks whether they still failed to comply with the royal decree, and also inquires if there are any reasons she cannot articulate. The lady says that she personally sees it that way, since they are no more afraid of King Edward's wife than they are of her. The king proposes to raise glasses and begin a ceremony for peace between the two countries. When Inez saw the prince, she asked in surprise if he was the same young man with the delegation from yesterday. He said she was crazy. The lady says she is Countess Inez, responsible for the management group. The gentleman asks if that's why she was so active when the conversation turned to the artists. Having answered this, she doesn't understand the reason for such arrogance. The countess says that yesterday she thought he was knowledgeable about art, and therefore hopes he'll enjoy today's visit. She asks how to address him. The gentleman replies that she can just call him Sheldon. The main character reports that they are almost there, and beyond this bridge, they will be able to see the main street where the festival is opening. The prince, surprised, asks if they had planned to rent the entire street and hold an exhibition there. A man from the delegation says he never even thought Lancaster had such a place. Inez says it's too early to be surprised, as this is only the beginning of the art trail. She explains that works by Lancaster's new artists are displayed all along the street, and visitors can explore them at their own pace following a guide. The gentleman says he had high hopes for this exhibition, as the Queen had said she would visit it and thought it looked like a Lancastrian innovation. At this time, the main character thought that they were trying to please all the people from Calderoff with their freedom-loving nature at this festival. The prince says it's a nice selection and thinks it's a superb exhibition. The lady asks what he's talking about and reminds him that she's the organizer. At this time, Enoch was watching them. Sheldon asks the lady to take him home, saying that she's so picky and that he's also a representative. Hearing this, the lady thought that it was arrogant because she didn't ask, because he seemed to be avoiding a conversation about status. A status that allows one of the Kaldorov aristocracy to behave outside all norms like Krehe, and the main character understands that he is definitely an unusual character, and this will become a matter for the country, and then agrees. The young gentleman asks if he can go with them, and says he's Manager Enoch. He says a tour has already been prepared for the other representatives, and asks if they'd like to join them. Kreha says he's the King of Lancaster. Sheldon agrees and thanks him for the offer. At this time, the main character thought that she had a lot of experiences, but it seems that everyone is enjoying themselves, so she is happy. Sheldon says it's a very good exhibition. Enoch thinks he's exaggerating, but the gentleman counters and assures him he's being honest. The prince says that given what he's heard, he believes things weren't easy for them at first, and he also wonders if the queen carefully selected her managers. After all, boycotting an exhibition for the king, knowing that there was a rigorous selection process, must have been very stressful for him, and he's asking if that's not the case. Enoch replies that it was not as difficult as he imagines, because the Countess of Brereton, who was chosen, is a very capable person. Kreha asks if this is the main square. Inez explains that the space was designed so artists could paint right there. She then reflects on how many of the paintings are already finished and look interesting. Enoch asks the lady if she wants to draw herself. She's surprised and asks what he's saying since she thinks she's the staff. He tells her it's a tragedy. The Earl asks if it wouldn't be a great loss for the state if its best artist were busy with governance and couldn't showcase himself in the best light. And as a member of the Lancaster family and the Earl's sponsor, he asks her to paint it. At this point, the main character thought the wall was already painted over, but she saw that the artist had spilled the paint and no longer wanted to paint on it. At this time, the prince thought that someone who has not encountered such a thing might perceive it in their own way and doubt its true meaning. Enoch says that sometimes when he meets such people, he involuntarily wonders if he is the kind of person they are talking about. The young gentleman also recalls that when he was a boy, he was told that King Enoch was better in the art of the sword, and this was not too strong in relation to the current king. The Duke looked at the Countess and understood that no matter what anyone said around her, what was important was what she felt inside. At this time, people were surprised, because the managing Countess of Brereton drew a waterfall. The girl asks the kids if they want to try drawing, and they agree. She says there are plenty of materials and suggests they wait in line and take their time. Suddenly, the boy starts crying, and the lady asks what happened. He explains that he wanted to draw a butterfly, but ended up drawing something else. Inez says his drawing looks like a caterpillar, and that it hasn't grown up yet, waiting to transform into a butterfly. Then she suggests drawing wings and trying to do it together. The boy says with delight that now this is a butterfly, and another boy comes up to her and asks her to also correct his drawing, since he also can't do it. The main character thought about how the kids on Artist Street were so young and interested in art, and she wondered if all of them would become artists. The lady understands that ordinary children face financial problems even before they reach adulthood, and cannot even receive a proper education while their talents are wasted within these walls. On the last night of the exhibition, the street walk ended and the final festival banquet began. The Queen says that before they begin, he will tell everyone present about the people who organized this exhibition and illuminated it with their light. Her Majesty offers a round of applause to these two people who worked day and night for the festival. At this moment, the Countess thought her heart was beating, as it had the first time she was recognized at a major art exhibition. She realized that if it weren't for His Excellency, she would never have experienced this feeling. Enoch thanked Her Highness and said that he was embarrassed that she mentioned her together with the Countess, and then said that this exhibition was entirely the idea of the Countess of Briarton, and he only helped her develop this idea. The Lord says that Lancaster's brightest rising star is the Countess of Brereton. The king wishes everyone to enjoy the banquet. The aristocrat says he is very impressed with how she organized the exhibition, and then asks where she usually gets inspiration for her work. At this point, the young lady was embarrassed by the attention she was receiving for the first time. Then she announced that she was going to powder her nose. When Inez went out onto the balcony, she thought that she was very grateful, but she felt awkward receiving so much attention, and she was tired of talking. Sheldon asks if she knows what a rumination is, and then says she follows him. Lady explains it was an accident. Inez asks him if he's going to the banquet hall because he thinks the event is in full swing. He replies that he doesn't want to see all the banquets in this country, which are so grand, and he's bored. Sheldon says it was a joke, and he enjoyed both the banquets and the exhibition. Then he asks if the Countess is busy and if she can talk to him. The prince says he wanted to apologize to her because he'd been causing her a lot of trouble from the start. He explains that it wasn't her or the festival that was the cause, and that he was apparently bothering her for personal reasons. Hearing this, the main character thought that, surprisingly, he was thinking rationally. Then she asked if there was a reason for this, and if it had anything to do with fine art. The prince, surprised, asks why she thinks so. The lady explains that when they first met, he was the one showing the salesman how to use Kaldorf paints, and the way he showed his interest in it at the festival made her think he was either very interested in the subject or he paints himself. At this time, the gentleman thought that this was indeed the case, and he could not resist his father for long. The Countess says she's heard that everyone in Kaldorf is interested in art. He says his father values the family business more than all that, and believes that's probably why she and other artists freely express their talent in a coveted place. He envied everyone without even knowing it. Sheldon says that looking at her makes him feel dependent on his father, and even more pathetic. Then, he says he envies her for being so genuinely proud of herself. At this point, the protagonist reflected on how she had actually lived without even imagining such a life. She then says that her former self was weak and dependent on her surroundings, didn't even know what she wanted to do, and lived only to appear selfless to someone. Liadi reports that after that life, she only knows those who left behind regret, and therefore now she no longer wants to live and be someone's shadow. Inez suggests that the gentleman should not give up his favorite business because of something like this and live a life that is not his own for someone else. The main character thought that it would be good if she understood this in her past life. She believes that she could have changed a lot, but now we can say that this was her chance in a new life. The lady wondered what she could do with such an opportunity. Then she said she was planning to return and asked what about him. The prince says that he will not go because he has already had enough fun. When the Countess entered the hall, she thought that the music had changed and the ball would soon begin. His Majesty asks if she will dance with him. He wonders where she went, as he was worried that his partner had disappeared. The young gentleman shook the girl's hand and asked if she would be so kind as to offer him the honor of being her dance partner. She agreed, and then they began to dance. Another cheerful composition on the street of arts, dizzying views, and a gentleman looking at her kindly, and she was having fun. When the music ended, the butler called the master. He apologized to the people and announced that he would be leaving for a short while. A man asks the Countess of Brereton if she will give him one dance. She replies that she doesn't dance anymore. He asks why she won't even dance with him now. Before the ball, Ryan's older brother hit him. He asks, surprised, why Hyun is hitting him like that. He says his younger brother is crazy because his wife pocketed absolutely all the money intended for the Gott Viscounts. Hyun, screaming, says they can move out onto the street right now. Then he asks if the maids aren't sorting out the gifts for this girl, and wonders what happened to make her so awful. Ryan replies that he doesn't know anything, and his brother tells him to come to his senses because they can still work it out. He says that an exhibition from the Emperor is opening soon, and they too received an invitation, although only one. Hyun tells him to find his wife there and beg on his knees for forgiveness, but he must return her. Then he remembers that she once grieved for him. The brother says that if he misses even this chance, their family will end. Meanwhile, Ryan says he heard his wife contributed to the event. He's glad she'll be able to showcase her skills at the festival, as a queen should be beautiful in everything. Hearing this, the main character does not understand what nonsense he is saying, because the fact that she was unable to reveal the artistic talent in herself is all because he blocked her path. Inez understands there are a lot of prying eyes there, and she won't raise her voice. Ryan asks if she was satisfied with the gift they sent her last time. Lady understands that this is a reaction and that Ryan, as usual, has thought everything through. However, she thinks it's best for him to stop dreaming. The main character says that she should have handed it over earlier, but she completely forgot with all her business, and then orders them to bring the documents that she left in the storage place. Hearing this, Ryan was surprised and curious about what could be shown in their relationship and whether she was really going to give the Gotts some freedom. And he thinks she hasn't changed a bit. After all, she hasn't given up on him yet. The Viscount believes that since he doesn't do everything according to her script, she will most likely try to get him back with some kind of show like a divorce suit. Inez invites him to take a look, and he says that it is such a valuable document. But when he reads it, he is surprised because the orphanage thanks the Gott family for their donation and promises that the funds will go towards caring for the children. Ryan, surprised, asks if this is a confirmation of a donation. She explains that this pile of gifts was sent by the Goths, and she gave them all to the maids because she believes there's a limit to everything, and her palace simply doesn't need it. The lady announced that she had donated the entire sum of the gifts he had given her on behalf of the Gott Viscounts. She then thanked him for participating with her in this worthwhile endeavor. Ryan, surprised, asks what this means, assuming she's already accepted everything. Inez insists they're not close enough to give each other gifts, then leaves. But suddenly, her ex-husband grabs her hand and screaming tells her he was wrong and has apologized so many times already. She asks, surprised, if he's gone crazy. The Viscount apologizes and says that this time he will definitely become a decent husband, and then asks if this is why she filed the lawsuit. The main character says that since this is how it happened, she will clarify the situation right now, and then says that she was disgusted by being his wife, and therefore believes that there is no need to try to say anything about a reunion or other nonsense. Inez says the only way she can find happiness is to never cross paths with him again. Hearing this, Ryan raises his hand to hit her. Enoch grabbed the Viscount's hand and asked what he should understand. Ryan, crying out that his wrist hurts, begs her to let him go. The gentleman asks why, then explains that he's never listened to her or appreciated her and doesn't understand why she should treat him with respect. The Viscount, screaming, says that he also received an invitation and claims that his actions can be equated to an insult to his family. Enoch says he doesn't remember inviting any rude people here who were planning to resort to violence. At this time, surprised aristocrats say that he wanted to raise his hand against the Countess and also know that he was divorced. Ryan looked at them in surprise and did not understand what he had done because he was Inez's husband and how he treated her was only his business. The Viscount falls to his knees and asks his wife to forgive him, and then asks if she remembers that he proposed to her at a similar event and promised to give her happiness, and this time he will definitely keep his word. The Countess says that she doesn't know what he's thinking, but she thinks that he's a nobody now, and therefore suggests that he leave quietly if he doesn't want someone who's already lost his status to be trampled into the ground. The servant tells the master that the emperor said he would deal with him and then threw him out of the castle and closed the door. The woman, surprised, asks what's going on and thinks the Countess of Briarton must be having a hard time. The man asks if it wasn't her fault to begin with, since she considers arguing with her husband in front of foreign guests shameful. The lady suggests that he watch his expression and then asks if he thinks it was a mistake to put all the responsibility for management on her shoulders. The Lord asks if they all think differently. The Lord says it's sad to think about it. The man is surprised when he sees him. His Majesty says that he did not help at all in managing the exhibition and asks how he was brought here, although he understands the desire to appear before representatives, but believes that this exhibition has shown the best results in the diplomatic and creative spheres in several generations. The king understands that many will gather here to watch, and therefore does not want these achievements to be belittled there, because for him, no personal advancement will take priority over the development of the Lancaster. His Majesty says that if the Lord is dissatisfied, then let him demonstrate it through his successes. The prince bandaged the lady's hand and asked if it was too tight. Inez apologized for having to do this, but he objected, saying it was his duty. The Countess says she's the one causing all the fuss in front of the representatives, but he suggests she focus on her own well-being. The lady says that, by the way, a similar situation happened that time, and he helped her, and she believes that he helps her every time. Enoch says that's true, and that he always wants to be of service to her to the best of his ability. Then he asks her what she thinks. Inez thanked him and said she was surprised, because there was even a first aid kit in the palace lounge. He explained that it was because of his esteemed majesty. The young gentleman explains that he likes to drink, and there have been situations where he has overdone it a little and gotten injured, and naturally everything falls on his shoulders. Enoch says he was foolish at the ball, and therefore apologizes as his actions could have made her uncomfortable. At this point, he thinks it's his fault because he was too emotional and believes he should have considered the Countess's feelings. The gentleman thought that as soon as he saw that this man grabbed her by the wrist, he could not think clearly. Inez objects and says that he did it for her, that he took care of her and stopped Ryan from harming her. She says she was glad about that. The gentleman suggested she rest and then said he would call a doctor. Hearing this, the lady realized she no longer needed treatment. When Ryan came home, his mother met him, and when she saw his hand, she asked in surprise if he was okay. His brother asked what happened and if anything had happened at the ball. Ryan explains that he's very tired and suggests they talk tomorrow. When he gets to his room, he thinks he's been stupid and that tomorrow his actions will be revealed, and the Emperor has said he'll personally punish him. The Viscount thought it was a curse, and all because of Inez. Then he remembered Charlotte and couldn't understand why she hadn't written to him lately. After the Empress's closing remarks, the festival came to an end. Enoch asks if she's tired. Inez replies that she probably gave in to her emotions. The young gentleman says she still looks happy. The lady explains that it's because she's proud of her work and the difficulties she's endured, and so much has happened. Inez says that while leading this event, she realized something and felt like she'd finally achieved something. He asks, surprised, what she means. The Countess says she's done something her past self couldn't even imagine, and then declares that she doesn't want to live in anyone's shadow, and she reflects on how she can now convey her thoughts to others. The lady says she can say she's become more self-aware, and it's all thanks to meeting him. The young gentleman says it's all her doing, and he just helped her get there a little. Inez believes there are many people in the world who are forced to live in the shadows without such assistance. She recalls her own time of grief when she was left with nothing, and now she knows what her former self needed: a desire to change her life. On the way home, the lady fell asleep. When they arrived, she apologized for him covering her with his jacket. He told her not to worry, and the lady said she'd return it after washing it. Enoch smiled, and the lady wished him a good journey. Inez looked at the jacket and wondered if she should tell Mary to wash it. She didn't understand how, but she put it on and looked at herself in the mirror. She didn't understand what was happening because she thought she couldn't pretend she didn't understand these feelings because she liked him. On the day of the representative's departure, Countess Inez, together with His Majesty, came to see the delegation off. The lady tells Sheldon she hopes he had a good time. The prince says her advice was very helpful, then kisses her hand and says that next time he will personally invite her to Calderoff's palace. The newspaper reported that the Lancaster Festival had successfully concluded, after which sales on the Street of Masters had increased significantly. The flow of visitors from other countries was endless, and it has apparently now become a Lancastrian tourist destination. The Countess of Briarton, of course, played a leading role in this exhibition. The dark-haired woman says it's amazing because the Countess successfully completed the celebration, and her friend says she's also delighted because they're alone. Then she says she was worried about whether she'd be able to win the divorce suit. The red-haired lady says it was overwhelming because she believes it is not easy for women to win a court case during a divorce. The dark-haired lady says that she has found her place and is now actively involved in public life, and the Countess is truly strong. The woman asks if they have heard these rumors, and then says that the Emperor, in gratitude for such a successful organization, wants to include the Countess in the Royal Art Association. The lady with red hair was surprised, and then said that this is such an honor for the artist, because it turns out that the Countess is now an official member of this association. The dark-haired lady reports that the decision was delayed due to dissatisfaction among the current representatives. At this point, the main character was thinking about how successful the festival had been, and how the younger generation of Caldorf was pleased. She thought she didn't have to worry about the Royal Arts Association, but this was unexpected. The maid tells the mistress not to worry so much, because even if she is not included, Her abilities will not go anywhere, and all the residents know about what she went through. Inez objects because she understands that they have enormous influence throughout the state and believes that it is impossible to be an artist in Lancaster without getting around them. The Countess says she wants to organize her exhibition after receiving their official consent. Mary, surprised, asks if this is important for her life as an artist. The lady explains that this is what she wants to do as an artist. And then she thought about how after this heartwarming exhibition ended, she immediately wanted to find a place to open her own. But who knew they would be so picky? The main character understands that she has a very long journey ahead, and she must be strong. Suddenly, a woman enters the room and says that she has received a letter from the palace. Hearing this, the lady thought that before this she had not even suspected that the issue with her personal exhibition would be resolved in this way. The head of the association claims that this is unthinkable because he believes that the Countess cannot be included in the association since there has not been a single woman in it before. The gentleman says that whatever her merits, she devalues the history and traditions of their association. Hearing this, the king smiled and suggested that the gentleman calm down, since they could start with small compromises. The aristocrat suggests that His Majesty not beat around the bush, since he believes that he has already expressed his desire for the Countess to join the association. Asher asks what he was thinking, and then, hearing this, the king asks what he just said. The head of the association apologizes to His Excellency and says he got carried away, even off topic, and then asks what the conversation was about. When the king was alone, he looked at the portrait of his father and thought that it was funny because people from other countries come to find out the situation there. His Majesty believes that he cannot fulfill even one demand of his subjects, but his father gave him the royal title, and apparently he could not justify it. The Duke of Sussex asks the Countess if she too has received an invitation from the Queen. She replies that she has and is unexpectedly pleased to see him. At this time, the main character thought that maybe it was because they had not seen each other since the exhibition, and it seemed to her that he had lost a little weight. Enoch looked at the lady and said that she looks happy because she has been smiling all this time. The lady thought that she should calm down, and even if she admitted her feelings, who thinks that showing them is a completely different matter because she understands that something could go wrong, and she risks ruining their good relationship. The Queen invites the two of them to pass, and then turns to the Countess and apologizes for what happened and explains that she really wanted her to join the association. Inessa says he's fine, and everything's fine, so she shouldn't worry. Her Majesty thanks him for his words, and then says she'll tell them why she called them both. The Queen says that a letter has arrived from Caldorf, and they want to officially invite the two of them on the occasion of the successful exhibition. Hearing this, the lady was surprised, and Her Majesty explained that they said they wanted to hear how they achieved such success, and at the same time, they invited them to open their first personal festival. Helena says that this has never happened before, and she will be proud of them, because it is an honor just like membership in the Art Association. Her Majesty reports that naturally this time too, there will be good people willing to help them. The main character heard this thought about the association workers, and then asked if she could go to Caldorf. The lady explains that she simply thought the association might protest strongly if she were to cause another stir in the art world. She then announces that from now on, she will be involved in the cultural life of this country, so they will have less to deal with. Hearing this, Enoch asks why it should be like this, and then claims that at the last festival, it was obvious that the Art Association does not care one bit about the development of culture. The gentleman says they're only concerned about their pride, dividing everything into good and bad, discriminating against people. He believes there's no point in depending on such pathetic people and suggests she do what she wants. The Queen says she will assume they have accepted the offer and will send them a schedule soon, but in the meantime, they can return. The butler tells His Majesty that the Emperor is waiting for him. Enoch asks if he was buried. The king replies that he was summoned. The young gentleman asks him to stop calling him without warning, and then asks what happened. The Emperor says that it will be unexpected, but this concerns the upcoming event in Caldorf, and then asks what if he does not participate in it. Enoch asks why surprised. His elder brother insists he knows for sure that the Lancastrian world is deeply against the Countess of Brereton. The prince says he knows the association is concerned about this, and the king agrees with him and says they have been actively protesting lately. His Majesty says that she won the case as a woman and also achieved a successful exhibition without the help of famous artists, and therefore they feel that this is a great threat to their reputation and merits. Enoch says that this is impossible, and then asks how this is connected with his refusal to participate. His Majesty says that there are many rumors about them, that she was able to lead an active life because of the Duke of Sussex. Hearing this, the young gentleman objects and says it's nonsense. The king says he knows, but his wife doesn't approach work casually, but he suggests he refuse this time. Enoch says he doesn't care what others think of them. Edward asks if he's sure the rumors won't affect his reputation. The Duke says that Countess Brereton is more important to him than her reputation, and if her abilities are limited, then the thirst for fame after accepting her talent, and he sees no other reason why his brother behaves this way. The king asks if there's another reason he's helping the Countess. He then explains that he means he'd better stop if his concern for her stems from her early interest. His Majesty says he's simply grateful to her because he hasn't seen him shine while doing anything in a long time. But he understands that if Enoch gets hurt because of this, and if he closes himself off again showing indifference, he wants to prevent it at all costs. The Duke says that his brother is right, and then says that he will indeed follow her because of his greed, and then reminds that, as he said, he was a victim of his desires and interests. And then he insists that it won't be this time, and Enoch says he wants to see her talent develop with his own eyes. And then he says that his Majesty might call that selfish. Edward says that he understood him, but still could not remain silent, and says that he can go and he will inform Caldorf that they will both visit them. Enoch tells his brother that he knows how much he worries about him, and therefore is very grateful to him. Hearing this, the king does not understand when he grew up so much, and now even he cannot be scolded. At this time, the queen entered the room and said in surprise that he looked as if he had let go of his child from his arms. Helena hugs her husband and says she knows he feels indebted to him for his childhood. Then she insists he can't live on that alone, and the Duke hardly wants him to. The Queen says that if he has made his choice, and if he is sure that it will be right, then all they can do is believe and gently guide him. Edward said they would do just that. And then he thought about how all the men in their family couldn't resist the girls they liked. But at least he, unlike his brother, had gotten married. The butler asks the lady to wait a little, as the carriage will arrive soon. Inez saw people who were members of the art association. The gentleman says that the fact that common people were given the opportunity to join the exhibition goes beyond all possible limits. Another aristocrat says the Countess chose too low a route to art. Moreover, this time around, many artists were featured who were living on the streets and barely making ends meet. The man says he doesn't understand where Lancaster's art scene is heading. Hearing this, the main character thought that she must endure, because she understands that there is no point in arranging a showdown there, and she believes that if she gets involved with them, something will happen, and this will affect his excellency. Suddenly, the girl heard Enoch say that he had a question, and then ask how they assessed this arrogance. The gentleman wonders why everyone has suddenly become silent, and asks if they said anything shameful about Countess Brereton. The lord asks if he himself doesn't see a problem with her behavior. After all, as an artist in Lancaster, he's required to read and adhere to the traditions of the Royal Society of Arts. The man offers to look at her and asks if he didn't notice how brazen she was at the exhibition. Then screaming, he says they're unhappy with it and that she's not even making an effort to enter their art world and get used to it. Hearing this, the main character thought that she was suffocating because no matter what she did in the future, they would again misunderstand and start making fun of her. Enoch asks if they've considered leaving her alone so she can adjust. Then he claims they tell her to her face that the art world in Lancaster is thriving, but behind their backs, they tell her nothing but mean things about the exhibition. His Excellency asks who would want to join them with such an attitude. And then he explains that they're forgetting one important thing, that Her Majesty the Empress entrusted the organization to 2 people, including the Countess, and that he too is participating in it. Hearing this, the man thought that speaking badly about this festival was an insult not only to the Countess of Brighton, but also to the Duke of Sussex. Enoch reports that he was the one who recommended her, and therefore, according to them, he does not understand people at all, since he chose such an arrogant person. The Lord screams and declares that this is nonsense, And then he asserts that they would never say such absurd things about him. The Duke asks if this absurdity is appropriate for the Countess. He says the Arts Association receives a state salary, and he thought all the artists who joined it had the proper personal qualities and behaved accordingly. Enoch says that despite such a lowly act as criticizing someone, he feels as if all the expectations placed on them have been dashed. He then declares his disappointment in them. The Lord asks if they will do anything, because he believes that their authority could be greatly damaged if they do not take action against the Countess. When Enoch saw the Countess, he thought she'd heard everything. He said there was no need for her to hide in such a place, and that this exhibition had achieved great results worthy of anyone's praise. The Duke says she doesn't need to listen to the words of these pathetic aristocrats. She turns to His Excellency and says everything is fine, and on the contrary, she's pleased that he's sided with her in this situation. The lady insists that overall everything is fine. She says she can't say it didn't bother her at all, and frankly, when she wanted to join them and earn their respect. Inez recalls that in a past life, Ryan passed off her painting as his own and became a member of the association. She regretted it and wanted to have at least something under her own name. The girl believes that in this life she also attached too much importance to the association, but she understands that now it does not bother her at all. Inez knows that Her Majesty and the Royal Society of the Arts is now the only one whose recognition she desires. She says she doesn't care what people think of her, even if she doesn't join the association, because she's a one-person artist. The Viscountess hits Charlotte with a club and asks if she thinks that in their family's situation, there will be money for an adulteress like her. The lady with red hair begs the mistress to let her meet Ryan again, and then says that if she gives her a chance, she will back down. The Viscountess asks, screaming, if it wasn't her fault from the very beginning, and believes that it was she who wagged her tail in front of her dear son. The lady says that if it weren't for her, he would have been able to continue living in luxury under the wing of the Countess of Brierton. Charlotte asks if she's implying that he's an innocent victim, and then claims he's the cheater himself. Hearing this, Ryan's mother, surprised, asks what she's talking about. The woman says that this lady is very impudent, and you won't find anyone like her anymore. At this point, Ryan enters the room. The girl asks why it's been so difficult to contact him lately, and then explains that he hasn't responded and that she came to him herself. The Viscount replies that he simply doesn't have time for her right now. Charlotte, surprised, asks what that means. He says he'll tell her straight out that he's dizzy with worry about how to get Eanes back, and that the fact that she was his partner makes everything very difficult. Ryan wishes her a good journey and suggests they stop dating. Hearing this, Charlotte was very disappointed and thought that he was a brute, and she wondered who would keep such a terrible man like him from loving her. Charlotte realizes she's already lost all her social standing and knows no one will want to marry her. She believes it's all because she's been slandered and doesn't understand what she did wrong. The red-haired lady believed that this was the only way to raise her status in the upper classes. When she got home, she thought about how she had rubbed her feet all the way. And after the affair was revealed, she was living such a life that she lost funding on behalf of her friend Inez. Charlotte recalls that she once lived in the most high-class hotel and fell asleep drunk from sweet food and alcohol. Suddenly, the lady saw the letter and wondered who it was from. Charlotte realized her mother was worried about her, because after all, they were still family. Mama writes to Charlotte that the Countess of Brierton has contacted her. Then she asks if it's true she's having an affair with Madame Inez's husband. The woman asks if she has done anything vulgar, as in high society circles, and also asks if she has forgotten to eat. Mom writes that this news made Dad feel unwell, because I understand how much money was spent on sending her to Lancarest, and she tells him to immediately apologize to Mrs. Innes. After reading the letter, Charlotte became very angry and screamed, saying that it infuriates her and that she hates Inez, because she believes that she is to blame for everything and that her existence always makes her look miserable. Charlotte recalls that when she was still a child, a beautifully dressed Inez approached her and asked her name. The lady with red hair remembers that her eyes were green like summer grass. The Jason Barons were an unremarkable family of minor nobles in the village, and they were so poor they owned no land. Therefore, her parents always had to cross paths with wealthy people. Charlotte understands that the only thing their family could show without embarrassment in such a miserable state was friendship with Inez. The red-haired girl was disgusted because she didn't understand why she had to treat such a bumpkin, and she took tasteless bread from children who reeked of slop. The lady recalled that their house smelled of burning because it was not ventilated, and all these memories only made her angry because she wanted it all to burn to the ground. However, Charlotte understood that nothing would change, and she would never be able to get out of this poor settlement. The girl dreamed that she would get married and live just as poorly, and would be buried in the same poverty, and suddenly fell asleep. And Charlotte was awakened by the voice of Inez, who came to meet her. The Earls of Briarton came to the village during the summer holidays. Their daughter Ines was as beautiful as a porcelain doll. The lady with red hair understood that even her appearance, which she considered the most beautiful in the area, could not compare to her beauty. The Earl of Briarton thanked Lady Jason for becoming their daughter's friend. They had been worried she wouldn't befriend her rivals, so the girl had received gifts as she grew closer to her. And Charlotte looked at the Briarton family and understood that they were very happy, and after a wonderful time spent with them, when she returned home, her mother asked her daughter where she had been all day, and then said that her hands were tired from work, and asked her to help her. Hearing this, the girl thought that she seemed to be suffocating, and leaving Inez, entered a completely different world. One day, a maid asked Inez to come over for a moment. The girl said she would be leaving. At this time, Charlotte lay down on her bed, thought that it was very soft, and thought that she wanted this to be her home. And when I saw the precious stone, I realized that it was probably worth more than their house. When Inez returned, she said that it was nothing serious, and suggested continuing to put the puzzles together. The girl doesn't understand what to do because she was confused and accidentally took this brooch and thought that no one would know if she returned it back tomorrow. At home during dinner, the father asked his daughter what she was holding. When he saw her, he asked where she got that high-quality brooch. Charlotte explains that Inez gave it to her as gratitude for their friendship. The father screams and asks if she thinks he will believe it. The man went with his daughter to the count and returned the brooch, and then asked for forgiveness, because he could not give her anything but thought that he was able to raise her well. Charlotte tearfully insists that she didn't steal anything, and then asks why he doesn't believe her. The lady with red hair believed that, although her parents did not want to interfere with who she communicated with, busy with household chores, they did not want to give her a proper upbringing. This was their love. Inez turns to the Baron and says that he probably misunderstood because she gave the brooch to Charlotte, and then she claims that she did not steal it. Hearing this, the father was surprised because it was a very expensive gift and said that she was very generous. At this time, Charlotte thought about the feeling of inferiority that had arisen in just a moment and was directed towards Inez, and this feeling that began to grow within her. Summer ended, and they returned to the city, after which Inez continued to write to her for a long time, and on one of those days, she received a letter saying that Inez's parents had passed away. Charlotte arrived at the Earl of Briarton's house and said she was at Inez's invitation. The butler asked if she was the Baroness Charlotte Jason and motioned for her to come in. At this time, Inez comes out dressed all in black and says that she did not know who to turn to and therefore asks for forgiveness. Inez tells her about the grief that happened to their family, but Charlotte doesn't listen to her and keeps looking at the high-class furniture and the luxury that was in the house. The lady with red hair thought that this was the very aristocratic life of her dreams. Charlotte tells her friend not to worry, because she'll always be there. And then she thinks she finally has a chance. Inez was in a very unstable state after the loss of her family, and Charlotte stayed in their house and consoled Inez, who was left alone with all her heart. The red-haired lady suggested Inez look at the roses she'd bought, thinking they might lift her spirits with seasonal blooms. Then she suggested removing the drab lilies and replacing them with these flowers. The maid says that the Count's family loved lilies, and the time of veneration has not yet passed. Inez tells Mary to stop because she did it for her. Charlotte tells her friend that the ladies are already running around the shops to get ready for the ball, and they look happy, and in their village, you would never even dream of seeing such a thing. Hearing this, Inez suggests going together, and it seems to her that her mood improves if she is with her. Charlotte asks if it's okay that she won't be able to look like those ladies, because in her haste, she didn't even grab a suitable dress. The lady says she'll cover all expenses so she can dress up. She then says she wants her first ball to be a wonderful memory. Hearing this, Charlotte said that it was very touching, and thought about her even in this torment, and she thought it was funny. The lady with red hair remembers that many high-ranking officials bowed their heads before her, how she was with her, and she did not feel the need for money every day was immensely sweet. Of course, there were also scammers who interfered with this. The young man approached the countess and said he was glad to meet her. Then he reminded her that they had met last night. Inez asked if he was Viscount Goth. Seeing them, Charlotte thought that she needed to contact some guy. After all, she understands that he looks like the most ordinary simpleton. Charlotte wondered if Inez would marry him, whether they would have the same happy family as her parents. A rich, carefree, perfect and beautiful family. And she thought it was kind of annoying. And then the red-haired lady approaches Inez and asks if she's been too brazen in their conversation. And the man says not at all. And then everything goes without a hitch. A friend asked Ryan if he loved her. He replied that of course he loved her so much that he wanted to get rid of her as soon as possible. The girl thought that Ryan had turned out to be just as simple as she'd imagined, and she was waiting for the day when she could take everything from her using her right as head of Ryan's family. After all, she believed it was an unconditional victory. The morning paper reported that Countess Brierton had received a royal invitation from Kaldorf. When she read this, she thought the world had been too cruel to her. Charlotte read about the Royal Arts Association's decline following its official boycott of the exhibition and thought it might be useful. The lady with red hair believes that Inez and Ryan are to blame for her being left to survive in this poverty, and therefore thinks that it is unfair. At this time, Mary asks the lady to be careful with food and cold water because she has a weak stomach, and also reminds her not to forget to take the seasickness medicine that she put in her bag. Inez tells her not to worry as long as she's careful, and then sets off on her journey. At this time, many rumors are circulating about these two, and that the Countess was able to take part in this exhibition only thanks to the Sussexes. The Countess turns to His Excellency and says that they have apparently arrived in Kaldorf. Then she says it's amazing because they simply wandered from place to place, but the scenery has changed so much. Enoch explains that the weather is calm because the sea is nearby, and there's a wide variety of seafood. She's surprised to hear this and says he's so knowledgeable. The lady asks him if he's been there before. He replies that the place connects him to his past. At this time, the main character thought that he does not talk about this because he thinks that this is an awkward topic for him. The Duke says that the Empress who invited them to Kaldorf. Some difficulties arose because the king has several children, but Prince Sheldon is the first heir and seems to have stated that he does not want to take over the throne. Inez asks why so suddenly. The gentleman says he doesn't know the exact reason, but they say the king is currently uneasy because of it. Therefore, he believes they will have to be more careful and avoid sensitive topics in front of him. The lady explains that she is asking just in case. The king greeted the Countess of Brierton and the Duke of Sussex and said he had heard a lot from representatives about their successful exhibition and especially about the Countess. Demos says that her creative popularity has spread to their region because she put in a huge amount of effort and fulfilled her duties, unlike one slob who forgot about them. The king says that he heard that she wants to open her own exhibition. And then he says that if she doesn't mind, then it will be an honor for them if they hold it here because they will spare no resources. Inez says she'll definitely do it. The king turns to the Duke and says Lady Attley influenced the decision to invite him. He thinks they probably still have good memories. Enoch says he will definitely thank her. Hearing this, the girl became curious about Lady Attley. With a respectful reception in Kaldorf, preparations for the exhibition gradually continued. The main character thought that she would be more successful than she imagined. The man informs the lady that all the parcels from Lancaster have arrived. When she glanced at the paintings, she realized they were all issued under the name of Viscount Gott and returned to her after the trial. The Countess says that if it weren't for this, her paintings wouldn't be at the exhibition. The gentleman says that this time he will finally be presented under the name of a real artist, and he will also go to help there. At this time, the main character thought that after that exhibition, he still helps her now, and believes that her debts to him are growing. Inez thought that it seemed to her that he saw in her something more than an ordinary sponsor, and she liked him, and maybe if they both wanted it, they would become a couple. The main character doesn't understand whether this is necessary, as she believes it will cause the association to start talking about him too. She assumes they'll break up badly and their relationship will deteriorate. The lady thought that maybe she was doing the wrong thing by not listening to her heart, but she understood that the mistake could not be corrected. At this point, Sheldon looked at the lady and then said that she had a sad face. Seeing him, the girl was surprised and then screaming asked how he got there. The prince tells her to be quiet as he left quietly avoiding security. Then he asks what's wrong and says he came to see because he thought she'd be very excited about the exhibition. Sheldon takes the lady by the hand and invites her to come with him. She asks surprised, where he says he's going to get some fresh air. When Inez looked into the room, she said that it was the first time she had seen such a huge studio. The prince asks if there are any such places in Lancaster. She replies that she's heard there are similar ones, but they're all owned by other people. The gentleman agreed with her and said that Lancaster was completely full. And the lady thought that this was undeniable. When the main character sees the painting, she says it's beautiful. She then reveals that she's seeing Kaldorf's work with her own eyes for the first time and believes it will be overwhelming in its passion. Sheldon asks if she really thinks so. She looks at him and asks if that's true. He says it's his painting. The prince explains that he offered to take her for a walk, but in reality it was just an excuse for wanting to show her off to her. He says that thanks to her, he wanted to create again. Inez says that she heard that he does not intend to become king, and believes that it must have been difficult for him to go against the orders of His Majesty. The prince explains that he's the first heir in name only, but in truth he has many younger siblings who share a passion for politics. He believes that's why anyone would be a better king than him. Sheldon says his parents haven't gotten over it yet and are still cautious. He reminds them that, as she said, it's unhealthy to live in the shadows according to someone else's wishes. Inez thanked His Highness for today and said that it was a breath of fresh air in the chaos of preparation. The prince says he thought she was upset because things weren't working out romantically. Hearing this, the lady objects and says she doesn't have anyone like that. The young gentleman thought that she had a good relationship with the Duke of Sussex, and if there was nothing between them, then he did not understand what this look meant. Sheldon says that even if that's the case, he's not bad either. At that moment, the Duke entered the room and overheard their conversation. The long preparations came to an end, and the long-awaited day of the exhibition finally arrived. The maid asks the Countess if she likes it. The mistress thanks her and says it's very beautiful, as she hasn't been able to get much sleep these days, but thanks to her help, she will look her best. And at that moment, I thought about how she would finally be able to rest after this day. Enoch. The Countess looks tired and then asks if she's okay. The lady asks if it's noticeable, since she thought the makeup would have hidden it at least a little. His Majesty says he's simply more worried about her than anyone else, and of course he'll notice. Then he says he thought she wouldn't even have time to eat, so he brought a snack. At this time, a girl ran up to the gentleman and asked how long they hadn't seen each other. Enoch says that this is Lady Margaret Attley, but the girl objects and asks to call her simply Margaret, and says that she really wanted to see them. The lady says that she never introduced herself properly, and then says that she and the Duke of Sussex were once engaged. Inez says in surprise that he had a fiancée, and she didn't even know. Margarita explains that they never got married because they weren't right for each other, but she believes that His Majesty is still quite good-looking. At this time, the main character does not understand why she did not even think that it could not be, that such a wonderful person did not have a partner. The butler informs the Countess that it's time for her to prepare the speech. The Duke suggests they go as he's looking forward to it. Inez addresses the ladies and gentlemen gathered there this evening and asks for permission to express her sincere gratitude for visiting her exhibition. The lady says that many people helped her with her organization, and therefore she is filled with pride that she was able to open her exhibition. The Countess says the theme of today's event is Come Back. Then she reveals that all the paintings there were once published under Ryan's name, but when she filed for divorce, she was able to prove they were her own creations. The main character says that all these works serve as an indicator that she has reclaimed her life and hopes that everyone present here will find a response in at least one of the paintings. The girl says the Duke of Sussex has provided her with invaluable support, and if he hadn't agreed to help, she wouldn't have had the chance to get her paintings back and show them to the world. She then thanks him. The Duke says he's honored to have been able to witness her genius firsthand. I wish everyone a good rest. At this time, the main character thought that she had not even imagined that the atmosphere in Lancaster and Caldorf would be so different since they had only just crossed the border. Inez believes that with the support of many people, she has gained status in Lancaster, but she knows that there are many who still look askance at the divorced girl. Margaret approaches the Duke and says the Countess is very popular. He replies that it's obvious, and besides her artistic talent, she's also very charismatic. Margaret says that he is not in a position to say anything about others, and then reports that now many girls want to talk to him. Anak apologizes and explains that he already likes someone at the moment. Hearing this, the lady was surprised, and then said that spring had come, even to such a seemingly small rock as him. Inez saw the Duke with the girl and became thoughtful. The Lord asked the Countess if she was okay. Inez apologized and said she must have had too much to drink, and therefore felt she needed to rest. Margarita asks the Duke why he is standing, and then tells him not to make such a terrible sympathetic face, but to follow her. When the main character went out onto the balcony, she didn't understand what she was doing, because she left in the middle of a speech at her own exhibition. Enoch asks the lady if everything is okay, and then says he was worried. She explains that she was wondering why she had such a strange feeling because she had previously gone out after him, and this time he came for her. Inez apologizes and says that she probably overindulged, but suddenly she tripped, and the gentleman caught her and hugged her around the waist. The lady asks how true the rumors are about his wedding, and at that time she thinks that she is stupid because she doesn't understand why she said this. The girl understands that as soon as she sobers up, she will regret it, but now she wants to know how he feels about these rumors and how strong his feelings for his fiancée were at that time, because she wants to know his feelings. Enoch explains that it was a long time ago because then they were both still children and no one took it too seriously. Inez says they were apparently very close, and at that moment she thought she should shut up. Then she says she thinks they approached each other and were happily discussing something. She also asks if he's sorry the rumors weren't true. The Duke asks how she is and then wonders why she asks. He says that no matter who they discuss him with or who confesses to him, and then asks if this has always bothered her. Hearing this, the main character realized that she was the one who first drew the line, distancing herself, out of fear of losing herself. And so she believes she has no right to interfere in his personal life, and thinks she can blame it on the alcohol. Inez says that she was not indifferent, and reports that she was glad that he thought about her feelings then. And when the situation with the Art Association happened, she was grateful that he was on her side. The girl says that for him, it could be ordinary good nature, and he said that there was nothing to thank him for, but for her it meant a lot, and she was worried about him very much. The Countess says that she did not want to burden him with her confession, and to be even more honest, she was afraid that he would not return to their previous relationship after that. Enoch wonders if he can ask why he excites her so much. Then he moves closer to her. The girl takes a step back and says that if he says it was a mistake, she'll accept it. At that moment, the Duke hugs and kisses her. Inez asks His Excellency to wait, and he asks why he has to wait all this time, and then says that he was only waiting for this mistake on her part. Enoch says that whether it is a mistake or sincerity, he doesn't care, and now, no matter how much she wants to distance herself, he will not give in to this. The main character says that they need to return to the hall, and then kisses him on the lips. The lady asks how long the Countess of Briarton has been gone, as she wanted to speak with her. The black-haired lady says she heard the mistress went to rest and believes she'll probably return soon. The exhibition ended after midnight. The protagonist learned that Margaret Atlee was the Marquis's wife and had abandoned her engagement to Enoch because she had found true love. At this point, the young lady can't understand how she could have been so wrong. Margaret explains that the reason they invited her to Caldorf is because they are the main characters in the exhibition, and she wanted to ask them for something personally. The lady says that she will explain later, because they will meet again at His Majesty's dinner. Enoch says it's time for them to go too. Meanwhile, the main character doesn't know what to do as her face burns with memories of what happened. The girl doesn't understand what will happen if she loses control in the carriage, but she's so tired that she falls asleep. At that moment, the gentleman thanks her for her trust, as she lay on top of him and considers her too vulnerable. Enoch says that, to be honest, He thought a little before going here. And as his brother said, if he doesn't want to cause her any inconvenience, then it's better for him to retreat, and he thought about it. The Duke realizes he's become accustomed to giving things up, and even if he had to reluctantly give her up, he felt he could do it for her sake. However, he worries about her, and no longer wants to be on the sidelines. The servant tells His Excellency that they have arrived, and when he saw them, he thought that he had no idea that they were in such a relationship. Enoch laid the girl on the bed and then asked her to take off her clothes and lie down normally, and said that he would call the maid. Suddenly, the man felt the lady holding his hand and telling him he needed to go. Inez turned to His Excellency and asked him not to leave, then announced that she wanted to stay with him tonight. When the lady woke up in the morning, she saw the guy lying next to her. She remembered what she had told him the night before and believed she had been out of her mind. Enoch asks if she slept well and then says she slept so soundly. Inez, surprised, asks if he didn't let her sleep, and the master apologizes. The Duke says that in fact, when he first opened his eyes, he thought she might regret that night, and he was worried about it. No lady assures her there's no reason for that, and all of yesterday's confessions were sincere. The girl asks how long he'll continue calling her Countess, and then reminds him that he even calls Margaret by her first name. She suggests that he call her Ines at least when they're alone. Inez tells His Excellency that there should be a dinner in the royal chambers today. He says they still have time and suggests they spend some time together, and then suggest calling him Enoch. The main character thought that in the end they weren't late and they barely made it on time. The king's aunt Melissa says she's glad to see them in such a setting. Then she apologizes and explains that His Majesty will be unable to attend today due to urgent state matters, and he said he'll make time before their departure. Sitting at the table, Inez thought about how, if you look closely at their first meeting, His Majesty introduced her as his daughter, and that's why she was confused. She thinks he probably often forgets things. Melissa asks if they are married yet, and then says that if she had a daughter, she would want a son-in-law like him. The Duke thanked the lady and then said he already liked someone, and looked at Inez. But the girl didn't understand why he was looking at her while saying such a thing. The lady turns to the Countess and explains that she has several nephews. The lady explains that, as an artist, she can't stand still and plans to focus on her work for a while. Upon hearing this, Margaret says she's already an amazing artist and believes she laid the foundation for Lancaster's artistic scene, which had been largely uninvited. She then reveals that she truly respects her. The Marquise thinks that it would be great if Andrea, her daughter, could study with her. Inez says she's heard that things are different there than in Lancaster, and that there's freedom in the art world. Margaret says that while they certainly have plenty of female professionals, there are no schools that accept girls. The Marquise says that she learned to paint pictures not officially, but at home. The main character explains that she was able to learn this because her parents respected her passion and cared for her, and because almost all girls from the nobility get married as soon as the time comes. Margaret asks if she would like to meet her daughter after lunch. Inez looked at the sea and said it was very beautiful. Margaret said they could admire it in peace since the beach belonged to their family. The daughter tells her mother that she's already arrived, and the lady says she'll be very surprised when she finds out who she came with. The Marchioness reports that it is the Countess of Briarton whom she wanted to see. The girl with black hair says that she is pleased to meet you, and then says that she is Andrea Atlee, and it is an honor for her to meet the lady. Inez says that she is also very happy to meet them, and then says in surprise that this is her collection from the exhibition. Andrea says that she has recently started learning to draw and asks if she could look at her work because she wants to hear her opinion. Margarita tells her daughter that she shouldn't bother the guests like that, but Inez says everything is fine. They're probably happy to see her like this. The main character looked at her parents and thought that they certainly weren't against her appearance and raised her well, and they even reminded her of her parents. The girl tells the Countess that she will take her to her workshop. Inez says that she draws very beautifully and believes that at her age, she already has such abilities and potential. Andrea was delighted to hear this, and the lady said that it only seemed that the movement was a little weak, and therefore she thought it would be a good idea to make sketches more often. The Countess says that it is not necessary to put all her effort into it, but she believes that it will help her if she learns to create special designs in a short time. Andrea says she's very glad she was able to listen to her advice. The lady asks if she's studying with her tutor. The girl replies that she has no one else to ask for advice from except her. Hearing this, the main character remembered that she couldn't attend the academy like other children and felt it was difficult to find someone who would appreciate her work. After all, she understands that she has so much talent and passion and is curious about whether she can continue drawing. Ines knows that the children from the artist's street were like that too, but they would not have been accepted into the academy because they were from ordinary families and they did not even have the chance to learn to draw. That evening, while strolling by the sea, Enoch asks the Countess what she's so lost in thought about. She replies that she remembered a recent conversation with Andrea and how children don't have the opportunity to have a variety of experiences, apparently just like in Kaldorf. The lady reports that in the state, because of its borders, academies accept only boys from rich families, and Andrea is much younger than her, but it is very sad that she is not a bit different from her at her age. Ines says it's strange because she's from an ordinary family and has nowhere to gain knowledge. And for these reasons alone, why should she give up her business? She apologizes, saying she was too deep in thought. The gentleman asks if this is all, and then explains that it seems to him that the Ines that he knows still has something left to say. The main character says that she wants to create a place where everyone can study, no matter who they are. Without discrimination, the main thing is to have the desire. Ines announces that she wants to build a school, and that children from both rich and ordinary families could enroll in this academy. The lady says that she finally realized that the art world in Lancaster is very strange, and the people in it not only do not try to develop themselves, but they focus only on themselves. Ines says that while some are in power, those who truly want to learn art lose even the slightest chance. The lady asks where such amazing kids will have the chance to recognize their talent and begin studying. The Duke says it won't be easy. Hearing this, the main character thought that this was being said even by the one who always tried to support her in everything, and believed that it really must be difficult, providing women and children with the opportunity to receive an education that was inaccessible to all of them at this time. And Ines understands that she will definitely be subjected to even more condemnation than she is now. But despite this, she wants to do it. The girl understands that at least the reason was her return before she became who she was, and she knows that many people helped her, and thanks to their good intentions, she received a new life. The main character believes that if she is destined to help someone change their life, then she will definitely help them. Ines looked at the guy and thought that this look that wishes her the fulfillment of what she believes in. Enoch says it will be very difficult, and there will be many things she can't do alone. Then he says it's not a bad idea because she'll have at least one companion in this endeavor. The Countess asks what to do if this time she cannot give him individual responsibility. The gentleman says that he will be able to work together with the artist by the hand of God, and therefore will suffer any damage. The personal exhibition in Kaldorf ended with great ceremony, and it was a pity that the time had flown by, but they decided to take a little walk before returning home. Ines asks the guy if he had to dress so simply. He replies that expensive clothes would have been too bulky. At this time, the girl thought that maybe he was just enjoying the fact that no one knew him there. They had a good time strolling down the street. As evening approached, the main character said that the dancing was about to begin. A woman passing by asks why they're not going since they're a couple. She says there's a legend that says a couple who dances on Kaldorf night stays together forever. Hearing this, the gentleman invited the girl to dance. He said he didn't care anymore, no matter what anyone said. Then he asked the girl if he could kiss her. Enoch explains that he is not going to do anything without her consent. The lady thought about the terrible thoughts she kept returning to, and what Ryan would do in his place. These unpleasant memories floated away with the warm, salty wind and vanished completely. A lot of people gathered at the pier because they all want to meet Countess Briarton, and they are surprised that the artist has gained great popularity. The gentleman says that Ines raised their country's rating in a state with which they had a long-standing mutual hostility. The gentlemen tell the Countess that they heard that her exhibition was in great demand and therefore ask for her opinion. The lady expressed her gratitude and explained that it was a significant event where she was able to showcase Lancaster's art. The man says that she has become the most famous artist even outside the country, and then asks what kind of work she wants to focus on now. The Countess informs that work will have to be postponed as there is business that she needs to take care of. The gentleman asks what's so upsetting about this. She replies that she wants to build a school where aspiring professionals can study art. The man asks, surprised, if they don't already have those. Inez says the academy she'll open will be open to anyone who wants to study without any discrimination based on status or gender. The Countess's statement received a huge response. The aristocrat said that even if they allowed ladies from high families to attend art schools, he couldn't understand why ordinary people should receive the same education as the rich. The Lord says this would be an insult to the entire Lancastrian aristocracy. He believes that allowing ordinary people and women to become educated means they risk competing with the rich and displacing them. But for those who had already established themselves in their place and were content with fame, this was a hindrance. The man asks if they even know a thing or two about art because he believes that this feeling needs to be cultivated from childhood. The lady asks if he has forgotten that their daughter also desperately wanted to study sculpture, but she had to give up her dream due to the lack of such schools. Those segments of the population that were deprived of such figures began to oppose such people. The woman says her daughter was so upset when she wasn't accepted. But her husband reassures her, saying they were just talking about ordinary people. But the woman insists their daughter is no different from them in that she can't get into art school. The man says that the Countess said that she wants to open a private school with her property and then asks if they have the right to contradict her. The gentleman suggests stopping because he believes that there's a lot of talk about this in the country now, and it cannot be stopped by some aristocrats showing their dissatisfaction. When the main character reported this to the Queen, Her Majesty said it was a serious undertaking. Inez insists she has no plans to back down on this matter. The main character says that, of course, the Arts Association's opposition will cause great harm to the wealthy segment of the population, and therefore considers it obvious that Her Majesty called her out of concern about this matter. Helena says she can't deny it, but moreover, she's interested in the reason why she doesn't pay attention to the protests and still wants to open the academy. Inez replies that this is because she believes that the art world in Lancaster can no longer remain in this stagnation. And to put it bluntly, every artist considers such steps of hers to be nothing more than a speck in the eye, because she is the Countess of Brereton. The Countess says that when she was the heiress of an influential family in Lancaster, and now an artist working even abroad, and despite all her achievements, she was unable to gain a foothold here because she is a woman. The main character asks what will happen to their descendants, because she understands that when the Earls of Brereton disappear and the Lancaster art world becomes closed again, like in the old days, she understands that nothing will change. Inez says that beautiful things tend to rot, and that is why she does not want such a future for the Lancaster art world. The Countess says that if she opens an academy and creates an environment where anyone can study art, the world will be filled with artists with their own free artistic styles. The Queen says in surprise that when they both say such things, it is so similar, and then says that she believes that the lady is right, as is His Majesty. Helena announces that the Lancaster government will not interfere with their opening of the school. She then says she hopes what she believes to be right will come true. The Queen says that they will not be able to help her with this, and therefore asks for forgiveness, that they could not be more helpful. Inez says that she is overjoyed that they trust her, because she understands that there are those who think that she is doing the right thing, and there are those who believe in her, and therefore she will never break. A few days later, a letter arrived at a small newspaper publishing house in Lancaster's district. The man suggests coming closer, because he has a special report. He's reading a report on suspected bribery related to the construction of the Countess of Brereton's school. The artist with the hand of God, Countess Brereton, is suspected of bribery, and it has been confirmed that the owner of the site where the school was to be built received a large sum of several million gold pieces during the period when the Countess announced the construction of her school. Upon learning of this, the main character says that this is unthinkable since she has never done anything like this, and they are still at the stage of searching for a site for the school, and this is some kind of nonsense. The man explains that this is the answer of Count Hansen, who also suffered losses because he was connected to this case. The construction of the academy could have raised the standard of living in the area, but since he did not want to feud with the Countess, he had to agree, and after the deal, the Countess postponed the choice of territory. Hearing this, the main character screams and says that this is complete nonsense, and that Port Publishing House published this news without a single compelling argument. The gentleman invites her to look at the land transfer document that the informant used as evidence. When the lady saw the signature and seal, she realized they were identical to hers. The man then reported another problem, and the original informant claimed to have helped her with it. The Countess asks who he is, and the man replies that it is Charlotte Jason. At this time, the reporter announces that they are starting their interview and says that in the letter, she indicated that she is an accomplice to Ms. Briarton in the bribery case. The man says that as far as they know, she was not on the best terms after the divorce hearing. Charlotte says it was her ruse, and after the affair, they separated. Then she reveals that the Countess contacted Hansen through her, and while preparing for the land deal, she committed an act no one was supposed to know about. The gentleman asks why she helped her back then. The red-haired lady says she was going through a tough time, and in exchange for her assistance, she did her a favor and said she'd help restore her damaged reputation. Charlotte says that she felt remorse and helped her with this deal all the time. But moreover, she was afraid that after a successful completion, she would finish her off so that she would not say anything unnecessary. The lady with red hair says that she was very scared and therefore asks for help. If you think about it, in the case of bribes between two people of nobility, there remain documents of transfer. Just like the fact that such a rich man as Briarton used Charlotte, with whom she has many common connections. Anyone would have sensed the lie in Charlotte's statements, but people like journalists don't need proof at all. The gentleman tells the lady not to worry, and that no matter what happens, they will announce this in their publishing house, or for the sake of revealing the truth, he believes that at the moment, this is a great accusation against the most famous artist in their country. The Arts Association feuding with Inez, as well as the segment of society opposed to her, only fueled these rumors. The news spread at a furious pace. The aristocrats did not understand whether this man around whom there was such a fuss could be trusted with a school intended for educating children. The lady asks if this article is true, because she thinks that the Countess does not look like a person who would do such a thing. The gentleman says that, recalling the unbearable image she constantly projected, one can imagine what she could have done. But he believes that no one knows the truth.